to that too. But defensively, it's a mess. I mean, I know, again, it's early, but I have been thoroughly unimpressed by what I've seen from this club on the defensive end of the ice.
They're not playing good hockey. Too many turnovers. They had their chances with the power play. I mean, toward the end of that second period, I mean, there must have been an invisible net of something around the goal, because they had just about every opportunity to take the lead after they came back and tied the game up. Every opportunity to take the lead, and for whatever reason, I mean, Seattle's goalie, how do you pronounce this?
Joey Daccord.
Daccord.
Yeah.
I mean, that kid was in net. He was, as you say, standing on your head. That kid was standing on his head for that particular moment. I don't know. Again, it's early and they're still trying to figure some things out. I understand when you bring new components to a team, it may take a little time to sort of iron out the wrinkles and get everybody on the same page. So I get that part, but the effort and things like that, regardless if you have a new team, old team, young team, whatever, the effort should always be there no matter what. And when you have odd man rushes, that tells me somebody isn't giving maximum effort. There's breakdowns on the offensive side, on the offensive end of the ice, which in turns put you in bad situations coming on the other side. So they got to figure it out. Again, I know it's only 3 games, but listen, 3 can turn it to 5, 5 can turn it to 10, 10 can turn it to 15. So get it fixed now, so you don't have to worry about it moving forward.
Willie, there was a quote from Andrew Burnett after the game last night that I want to get your opinion on when I saw it shared on social media. Burnett said, quote, "We're trying to be cute. We're trying to show how talented we are to everybody, but we're not really playing with a purpose." What do you make of that?
I think that was accurate last night without question. I think last night was different than the first 2 games in some ways. I think the Predators, and we pointed this out a bunch of times on our station, on our broadcast, I wouldn't say they dominated the first 2 games, but they had the upper hand in territorial play and a lot of the things that you want to do that most nights are going to win you games. It didn't get the result. The odd man rush thing has been consistent through the first 3 games. That is the one area that is very fixable, but they're disconnected with how they get back on defense, right? When you play forward and aggressive, they are not playing back. Like, for example, a Barry Trotz team traditionally going back through the years, I think Predator fans might be able to envision those types of teams. They were a little bit more rigid in making sure that you are not going to get odd man rushes, breakaways against, right? Because they are going to make sure that those players are back, the safeties, etc. An Andrew Burnett team, and to some degree a Peter Laviolette team, is going to push the envelope, be more aggressive. But when you do that, you really have to be on the same page and be connected to make sure that you don't get caught up the ice. And they have been caught up the ice way too much. So the attention to detail with the system, there's been too many breakdowns, and it burned them last night. The one you mentioned, they dug out of a couple holes. At the end of the second period last night, I felt pretty good about where it was going. They didn't play great in the first 2 periods, but they battled. They dominated the last 5 to 10 minutes. And somehow they didn't score. I thought for sure that they were going to take the lead there. They didn't. So they go into the third period, and Jaden Schwartz scores at the end of an odd man rush where they got caught up the ice. Not everybody on the ice was on the same page, and they got burned. And then, boom, another goal scores, and they unravel from there. So all that to say, look, this is fixable. And I would point out that there's you mentioned the 0-3 team in 05, 06, 07. I think there was some huge parallels, right, of what Andrew Burnett said last night and what Barry Trotz said back then. I was part of the announcing team back then. I remember that team very well. That team in 06, 07 was really good the year before, unexpectedly, with Paul Correa. They had the best team they had ever had before. And then they added Jason Arnott, J.P. Dumont. They had Shea Weber and Ryan Suter coming up through the ranks. And they thought they were really good. And they rolled in, and I believe they lost to Chicago 8-6 the first night. Chicago wasn't very good back then at all. In fact, they were terrible. And they went 0-3, and they were giving up a lot of goals. And I think the quote from Barry Trotz was something like this back then. We'll have to ask him about it, or maybe Jared will next Tuesday. He said, okay, you guys are playing the way you guys want to play, and we see what it is. It's 0-3. Now let's play the way I want you to play and see what happens. And they went 9-0-1 and got it together quick. I think this team has a lot of similarities. On paper, with the additions they made, like Arnott and Dumont back then, Marchessault, Stamkos, I think there's a little bit of sense of, hey, we could just out firepower people, right? We're just better on paper. Look at these. We got these 40-goal scorers here. We got Forsberg over here. We're going to just outgun you. But if you don't play connected, it doesn't really matter who's on the ice and how talented those individual guys are. So I think that's the point, Brunette. And he said, we've lost our identity. You think about last year, the relentlessness, that was everybody humming along at the same pace. Everybody was connected. So it's not just playing the system, but it's playing together. It's playing fast. He mentioned last night that they look slow. And he said, when you're disconnected, you look slow. And Seattle was the quicker team last night. They were the more connected team. Seattle's a pretty sneaky good team. They're very deep, and they played their system very well last night and won. They deserve to win.
So with that being said, Willie, and it's crazy, and I've always said this, at least for the last 3 seasons, there seems to be some parallel between them and the Tennessee Titans. I don't know why it happens, but it seems to be a parallel between those two teams at times. And right now, it seems like the parallel is you bring in these high-powered, free agents or guys that have done well in your particular sport. You put them all together, and then all of a sudden people think like, man, look at all this fire. Look at the Titans. They got 3,000-yard receivers at one point in their career. Look at the Nashville Predators. They got 40 goal scorers that they brought in, not knowing that, yeah, you can bring these guys in, but until they start to mesh, I don't care if they score 90 goals apiece. It's not going to work. And right now, whatever they're doing, it isn't working well enough for them to win games. Maybe, just maybe, and listen, I'm not the head coach here, but maybe just maybe stick with a line. Stick with a line for a few games or so and see what those lines do instead of trotting out a line there. It's not going well, then you change the line again. Guys got to get used to one another. Yeah. And listen, Coach Bruno knows more than I could ever know, and Barry knows more than I would ever know. But being an athlete, knowing that continuity is everything in sports, especially when they're so closely contested, you have to stick with something and allow it to start working before you say, I didn't work this game, let me switch again. I didn't work this game, let me switch. You got to sit in it for a while. You got to stew in it and see and let these guys let them figure it out themselves. Tell them to do something, show them what to do. Tell them, hey, listen, run it my way now. Like you said, Willie, let's do it my way. But let them work through it as they're doing it your way. If it's not working, don't say, I need to change the line again. Let these guys get used to one another.
I think that he actually mentioned that. He said, maybe it's on me. Maybe I should be a little more patient with the lines. They do continue to try things.
They have
Let's
started.
Keep in mind,
they have started. I just want to point this out as you continue. They have started a different second line in each game. It went Stamkos, Novak, Marchessault in the first game. Stamkos, Sissons, Marchessault in the second game. Smith, Stamkos, Marchessault in the third game.
Right.
That second line, there has not been a game where the same second line starts the game yet this season.
And they knew that was going to take some time. They said it July the 1st when Andrew Brunette was interviewed by Jared on July 1st. Believe me, I was listening because what a day that was, right? Jared said, well, what are you thinking? What are you thinking about? Who's going to play with Marchessault and Stamkos? Because everybody was thinking the same thing. That's the perfectly logical question to answer. And he said, we just did this. It's going to take some time. And I got to figure it out. And he said it's going to take time when the season starts. And he's continued with that theme. So the question is, also keep in mind that when they played the preseason games, for whatever reason, the teams that they played against didn't dress anybody. They didn't play against an NHL team in the preseason at all. They wanted to, they played their guys. And unfortunately, in those games, the other team was playing the AHL guys and prospects. They also had a game that was canceled against Tampa Bay. So that was one less game they had to look at it in a real game setting. Not to make excuses for them, but I think that has slowed down the process of getting those guys up to speed and getting the chemistry together the way they wanted. So maybe that is the solution, is go with something and let's stick with it for a couple of days. But this is a constant dilemma that coaches have, I think, with this part of it. I think the disappointing part to me is that it's one thing for the new guys to not quite be on the same page yet, but it's the guys that are back from last year, they should be the ones picking up the slack, and that's where I think some of the disappointment comes from. They're 0-3. Here's another example. I'll give you a few. We've talked about 06-07 was 0-3. John Hines' team that surprised everybody and made the playoffs in 21-22 was 1-4 to start the season. Last year's team was 5-10, famously. There's a team in Predator history that went 2-5-1 in the first 8 games. And that was the 2016-17 team that made it to the Stanley Cup final. So all that to say, I know that there's this notion of if you're not in it by Thanksgiving, if you're out of it by Thanksgiving, you're not going to come back. And that is true most years. But I do think that plenty of Predator teams have started slow and figured it out. I could go on. I mean, there's other teams that we can point to. So,
but how many Predators teams spent $108.5 million for perhaps the 3 best free agents on the market in one summer? I think that's what Predators fans are upset about.
Why does that have anything to do with?
Because it's high, because of the level of expectation. I think that's why people are upset about this start.
Well, I think the 16-17 team had plenty of expectation.
Sure. But I'm not saying one is worse than the other. I think the
06-07 team had huge expectations after adding Arnott, Dumont to already Paul Correa.
Not discounting that either. I think that is why you've seen some angst from Predators fans.
Angst is absolutely natural. When you're 0-3,
yes,
angst is going to be there. Like, it's
right.
I don't blame anybody for being upset and worried and all that stuff. Absolutely. Andrew Brunette, I guarantee you didn't sleep very well last night.
You made a point.
I didn't sleep very well.
You made a point that I think is interesting, because when we had this conversation before the start of the season about how long it was going to take the new guys to adjust to their new surroundings, the one thing I kept falling back on, to your point, Willie, is I don't expect as much of a learning curve, because most of the players on the team know what's going on. The newer players are insulated maybe a little bit from those struggles because the majority of the team is back under Andrew Brunette. They know what to expect from him and what he wants out there. And you have veteran players who have, who should be able to adjust. Albeit, in the case of Stamkos, as we've talked about, spending 16 seasons in one area, you develop certain instinctual things. He's going to have to rewire his brain, to borrow a term from Will Levis. But I agree with you. I feel like the players that are returning from last year's team, I expected more of them to start to maybe pick up the slack for the new players that may need some time to adjust. One of the things that, when I knew it, but when I wrote it down, it kind of shocked me. The Predators have not led a game at any point this season. They are the only team in the NHL to have not played a single second with a lead. Right. Every other team in the league, even the Avalanche.
And they've been down 2-0 in all of the games. That was my stat of the game, if you want to call that. After home games, I do a stat of the game. That's what I centered in on, because I think that lends itself to, you start trying too hard, you start pushing, you start forcing, And that's where, if you're not on the same page, you get exploited. I do think that has happened some to them, and that's probably overgeneralizing it. But like I said, at the end of 2 periods last night, I thought they were on the verge of busting through and winning. So each game, they've been right in it. It's not like they're getting blown out or anything like that. These are fixable things. But I agree with you. Philip Forsberg last year, tons of shots, more than he'd ever taken before. And I think he had 1 goal in the first, 8 or 9 games, ended up with 48. I'm seeing some of the same things right now. Forsberg, Marchessault, Stamkos, they've combined for 1 goal, the 340-something goal scorers. They're getting tons of shots. They're getting huge chances. It's not going in right now. It will over 82 games if they stay healthy and keep doing the same things. They're generating plenty of chances offensively. They're going to start scoring more goals. I think what they've just got to make sure they are doing is getting connected, not trying to do too much, staying patient, and not getting caught up the ice and giving up these huge chances to the other team, which is putting them behind the 8 ball. It's digging them holes in games.
Austin on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, I think makes the point I was trying to make before about the spending and free agency. Austin says, Preds felt like they were going to take the lead last night for all of 4 minutes. Power play was supposed to be bolstered by free agent acquisitions and has been underwhelming, 1 for 11 to start the season. Stars haven't been scoring. Saros looked rough. Last season, Trotz told us to be patient. Spending in the offseason told us to get excited. I'm not excited through 3 games. That is
why would anybody be excited after 3 games?
But I think that's my
They're
point
0-3.
about. I
You
think
shouldn't
that
be
was
excited.
my point.
You should be upset. You should be angry, but you should not panic. I think you always worry. You're always worried about something, but you have you have 79 games.
I understand.
79 games.
I am not hitting the panic button right now.
Let me give you the power play. The power play is 1 for whatever it is.
1 for 11.
If you watch that power play, they have the puck. They're getting the pitches. Like, it's like getting pitches to hit and just not hitting them.
I would agree with that.
They are peppering the net. It will start going in, and they will only get better in how connected they are. You know, with those 5 guys that they've chosen to go with, right? If they had the same 5 guys from last year, then I would be a little bit more concerned, like, what's going on? But you always look at things. Are they getting zone time? Yes.
Yes.
Are they getting shot attempts?
Yes.
Yes. Are they getting pretty good quality? Yes.
It's getting better.
It's getting better. Needs to continue to get better. And it's just not going in. But the 4-on-3, I thought, was maybe the biggest moment in the game, where the crowd's into it. They've tied the game. They're on the verge of taking the lead. They've got golden opportunities. They're hammering and it didn't go in. Again, got to get it done. You should be upset. You shouldn't be excited. But I think it is kind of back to the drawing board, right? Maybe this is what they need to shock themselves into saying, we need to get back to the basics here and get connected.
It's early. Again, I emphasize this. It's early. I personally am not striking any sort of panic button yet. But when we talk about deficits that you have to make up to qualify for the playoffs, a challenge for a division title, the Predators are already 8 points behind the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars are 4-0. Winnipeg is 3-0. The Predators are 0-3. So, I mean, those 8 points, it's 3 games into the season, but 8 points is a significant deficit to try to cut into over the course of the season. But the Predators fall to 0-3-0 to start the season. Tomorrow, they will look to avoid their first 0-4-0 start in franchise history. Have never started a season 0-4-0. 6-1-5. 6-1-5, 737-1025. That sounded like a hockey record. They were 6-1-5. 615-737-1025. We'll continue the discussion on the Predators with Chris Mason, Willie's broadcast partner. We'll do that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063. The Game.
Okay, let's talk Loan Pronto. They have recently locked in a homeowner at 4.59% APR, the lowest in a couple of years. So the Fed has taken action. They've lowered rates for the first time in a long time, and Loan Pronto has followed suit by lowering mortgage rates. So this is the time to act. Whether you got your loan last month or last year, call Loan Pronto and dump that high rate loan, especially if you did it recently and that rate is a lot higher than you need to have. Lock in a lower rate fast with virtually no paperwork, usually no appraisal. There's no limit on how many times you can refi as well. So even if you're in this process with another lender, give Loan Pronto a call and see if they can help you. Act now. You can even skip your next 2 house payments. Call 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com is the website. That's 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781 on approved credit, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
D-Mace, Vingen, and Donick, 1025, 1063, the game. It's time to chat with our resident goalie, Chris Mason, Predators TV analyst, joins us on our phone line, driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com. Chris, we were just talking about the Predators' 0-3-0 start to the season after losing 7-3 to the Seattle Kraken last night. And the first thing I brought up that has me pretty concerned is their defensive play. the Predators' defensive play through 3 games, specifically in giving up odd man rushes. We saw Seattle score 2 goals off of odd man rushes last night. It's been a problem through 3 games. What are you seeing as to why the Predators are having these issues defensively?
Yeah, that's one of the most concerning things, but it's easily correctable. So that's where I stand with that. But what they're doing right now, and I think the other games, I think there was stretches, smaller stretches, and maybe condensed in a certain time, the second period in particular, against Dallas. And then there was a few against the Red Wings, but, it's manageable. And maybe, you could say, oh, it's the beginning of the season, everybody's kind of doing that kind of thing. And we're not back to the, the clamping down on the details. So that's something that's going to come. But last night, the dam broke. It was not good. I don't know how many times they got caught with 3 forwards being over aggressive. It's not a matter of the work ethic. These guys are working hard, but when you play hockey and when you're in a system like that, you always say you got to work hard and smart. And they were just going after it. It was almost like they're just throwing, their intuition to the wind and just going after the puck carrier. And, so in a situation, let's say you have 3 guys going hard on the forecheck and they're below the goal line. Well, that's a red light for a defenseman to pinch down the wall, unless you're 100%, which is very tough in that situation to know how to do. But there's times, the one time I think it was in the first period, Lauzon pinches down the wall. He gets beat. The puck goes by him. It's a 2-on-1. It's in the back of the net. And then instances like that where they just weren't reading the plays. They weren't supporting the way, that they defended last year, I guess, is where I go back to, it's early in the season. So you kind of default to last season when they were playing well and they were supporting each other. They're just out of sync, and I think they're almost trying too hard early and just not really thinking and reading off each other very well, which is leading to those odd man rushes. And it's happening, I thought last night too frequently, and it really cost them. And I think, I'm not really concerned about it. It'll eventually sort itself out and they'll start playing the right way. But last night was not good.
Chris, the Predators have started a different second line in each of their first 3 games. Of course, those lines change over the course of the game, but in terms of the lines that we expect at the start of the game, what we see in pregame line rushes, they have started a different version of the second line in each of their first 3 games. It's important for the Predators to get Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault going at 5-on-5. Based on the combinations you've seen so far, which one do you feel like gives the Predators the best chance to allow those 2 players in particular to get going offensively?
Well, that's tough because I don't really know. I think if we had saw one of those lines that maybe Bruno would have been a little more patient with it and stuck with it. I think last year, and he did this at the end of the game, he put Stamkos with O'Reilly and Forsberg and then shuffled I think it was Sissons Nyquist at the end of the game. He moved them down with Marchessault. And when they traded for Zucker and Beauvillier last year, they tried to start them together, and put somebody in the middle. And it didn't really work out because they weren't really familiar with the system. And when you have 2 guys on the same line, it kind of, throws things off. So I'm very interested to see how he will approach next game. And maybe that's something that's in the back of his mind, or that he's talking about with the coaching staff and the players, is to maybe try to split them up, although eventually you're going to put them back together, but just to get them acclimated and maybe just to try to get, something going between those lines. I thought the Novak, Evangelista, Jankowski line was their best line last night. I thought they were really good. But yeah, that line, you could just see hesitation. They had Cole Smith there, and he was hoping that would drive them and bring them into the fight and get them into, being aggressive in terms of the way that, they're exiting the zone and getting into the zone, and it didn't really work out. So I'm not exactly sure, but I do know at the end of the game, he split them up. So we'll have to see. That's one thing I'll be looking for either today in practice what the lines are, or tomorrow at pregame skate.
We're talking with Chris Mason, part of the Nashville Predators television television broadcast. Now, you just mentioned the line with Novak in it. He scored 2 goals over the last 4 games. Assess his play thus far, because he was one of the guys coming into the season that was going to be a spotlight on. He needed to take another step in his maturity process on the ice and start to have a bigger role or take a bigger role in what they were doing. But assess his play thus far.
You know, this is and this is kind of goes back to Adam's question as well. To me, he's the guy that's got to be the centerman between Marchessault and Stamkos. I think he's got the skill set. He's the type of player that I think those guys need in order to thrive, because he can hang on to pucks. You know, he's not like let's say a Cole Smith and a Colton Sissons, guys that are playing straight lines. They drive, they're good down low, they can get pucks and you know, get up and do that kind of thing. But Tommy Novak is a player that can handle the puck. He's a very good heads up player. He can hold on to it. He can bring coverage to him. He can make plays. I thought the last couple of years, he's really started to take more of initiative to shoot the puck. He's got a great shot. He's the guy that needs to play there eventually. But he was the one that started the season and things didn't go great at the start. And, you know, for whatever reason, Bruno didn't like what he saw. And I don't think, you know, anybody did. They weren't clicking. He's got chemistry with Evangelista and Jankowski, I think, which we all saw last night. They were the most effective line. I think they played very well together. But eventually, to me, he's the guy that's got to go up and he's got to grab that moment. And I think he's at a point in his career. He's had some really good stretches. We've all seen the talent, the heads-up play and the power play. He's nifty. He's a really skilled player. But it seems every time he gets in one of those situations where he's kind of promoted to, all right, you're in a top 2 line situation, he hasn't quite risen up to that challenge. And I think this year, eventually, that's got to be the line. If you want that 2-headed monster, the top 2 lines to be able to produce consistently and be in matchup nightmares for oppositions like, you know, they were hoping for, I think to me, he's got to be the centerman on that line.
Chris Mason is with us. We're talking about the Predators last night, falling 7-3 to the Seattle Kraken. Mace, it was interesting to me as you looked at the final stats. Last year, when they were really cooking, the 4th line, and it ended up being the same guys for most of it with Sherwood, McCarron, and Cole Smith. Last night, the 4th line was McCarron, Colton Sissons, and Juuso Parssinen. I would have thought that going into the game, you know, you can rely on that line. They get, unlike some 4th lines, they get important defensive assignments. But last night, if you wanted to zero in on one line that really, because everybody's looking at who's not scoring and things like that, but the 4th line last night really struggled. And I think Andrew Brunette, I heard him reference that in the post-game press conference. And
yeah, he mentioned that. He goes, maybe that's one thing I like about Brunette is, you know, he's trying things and sometimes, you know, he takes responsibility for something that might not have worked out. But at the end of the day, you know, you've got 2 for sure, extremely reliable players. And I bet they could tell you, you know, Kara talked to McCarron after the first period, and that line was able to get the first goal of the game for the team, but they gave up 3. They're on for the first 3. And some of those plays and situations aren't typically what you're going to see. They're one of the lines that got caught 3 guys down low. They turned over a puck in the defensive zone, ends up in the back of the net. So there's a lot of uncharacteristic plays and situations, I think. And, you know, part of that maybe not having playing together, knowing that, hey, you know, Sisson's always going to be the first guy in, or McCarron, and just reading off each other. But these guys know better. They've played with enough different players over their careers. They understand the responsibilities and the reads and things like that. It's just, it was an off night. It was not a good night. And, you know, we're not in the point of the season where I'm concerned about anything long term. They're eventually going to right the ship. They're eventually going to score goals. They're going to score a lot of goals. They're going to be better defensively. They still have some key players learning the system. But to me, I think the biggest thing is a mindset. I think sometimes when you add players like Stamkos and Marchessault and Brady Shea, you might think as a collective that you don't have to maybe work quite as hard, because last season, every single night, you knew every single player would do whatever it took, whether it's going to the net and all these different types of things. And right now, I think it's a combination of it's early. They're not executing the system. And one of the things that Brunette said to us before the game, and we talked about it on the broadcast, is that he knew it would take the new guys a while to kind of get it and to kind of, get it into their repertoire and the muscle memory and just, getting rid of the old habits and the way that you play. But he said a lot of the guys that played it last year and played it, down the stretch and played it very well aren't playing up to the standard that they all agree they need to play to in order to be successful. So that's the thing that's even more concerning, is the guys that know how hard it is, but know the rewards of if you play it that way, the success you can have as a team, that aren't doing it right now. So they've got to kind of get their minds back into, I don't care if we've added skill, I don't care if we've added superstars, you have to play with that same grit and that same determination. And it's hard and it's demanding. But if you do it, you can win hockey games, score a lot of goals, and you can play the brand that they want to play. And they're definitely not there yet.
Mates, leave us with this. I think Andrew Brunette issued the challenge. I think it was to Kara when she asked about the Oilers coming in. I feel like the Oilers, in some way, this is a good test, because Andrew Brunette just laid it out very simply. He goes, if you play summer hockey, disconnected hockey, without our identity against the Oilers, see how that's going to go. I feel like that will be the message today. And maybe a team like the Oilers coming in could, for lack of a better term, almost scare them into, hey, we've got to change or else this is going to be ugly.
Well, I think when you have and we've seen how that is, by the way. We've seen that in Bridgestone, that when you're not ready to play against that team, we've seen that against this team. And it was actually at a similar time, I think, last season. If you're not ready to play, they're gonna eat you alive. And, they ended up squeaking it out in overtime. But this is a team, they're 1-3. They're not off to a great start. This is a team that made the Stanley Cup final, and they intend to be back there again. So I think the opponent does do that to you too, because if you go and play, maybe Seattle doesn't scare you. Yes, they have a good team. Yes, they're deep, but you don't look at them and just go, you just don't have that fear factor. But everybody knows if you're not ready to go, and if you're chasing plays, which means you're going to take penalties and you're behind the play and you're out of position all night long, you're going to be reaching, and eventually you're going to start taking penalties. And then maybe the best power play, I think, that we've seen in the last century is going to rip you apart. So I think that if you're in that locker room, there has to be a sense of urgency. It's not time to panic or anything like that, or have closed door meetings or anything like that. But you have a tough home stretch here, and it starts tomorrow against the Edmonton Oilers, who are in a similar situation as the Predators. They're not off to a great start. They got their first win, but they're going to come in. They're going to come in looking for blood.
Chris Mason, Predators television analyst, joining us as he does every Wednesday morning. Mace, thanks for joining us. We'll talk next week.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Always a pleasure to talk to Chris Mason. Anytime you can talk to a Mason, a Chris Mason, a Derek Mason, a Free Mason,
another Derek Mason,
Anthony Mason, TSU grad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just the Mace family.
Yeah,
so many.
Or drinking out of
Masons.
a mason jar. I mean, do what you do.
That is a nice thing to do during the summertime.
Yes.
615-737-1025. Coming up next, we have a college football game this weekend with major playoff implications, and we'll get to that next. Also, tune in to 102.5, 106.3 The Game this Saturday for Vanderbilt football. The Commodores will take on Ball State, with pregame beginning at 4:30 p.m. on 94.9 The Fan, moving to 102.5 The Game following the Preds game. Vanderbilt football kicks off at 6 p.m. Coverage is also available on the 102.5 The Game app and at thegamenashville.com.
Hey, this is Derek Mason. You heard me tell you about Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a resolution to shed some extra pounds, only to face disappointment. But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands this frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. The comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and no one else. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
Preds fans, don't miss tonight's Smashville Live at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs at 6. See your favorite Predators players up close and personal. You can get autographs and pictures too. Player guests this evening will be Philip Tomasino and Juuso Parssinen. That's tonight at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs and on your home of the Nashville Predators, 1025 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. We have a very intriguing college football matchup, SEC matchup on Saturday. I heard Chase describe it as a loser leaves town match. And for those of you who are not fans of professional wrestling, that was a way for wrestling promotions to basically write characters off. You know, two wrestlers would fight. The loser would have to leave, quote unquote, because maybe his contract was expiring or he was going to another company, whatever. But that's how they used to build up to it. Loser has to leave. So this is what the loser leaves town college football playoff version. Alabama at Tennessee on Saturday afternoon, number 7 Alabama at number 11 Tennessee. It does feel like the loser of this game may be on the outside looking in of the college football playoff.
I would agree. And I would take it one step further. Even if they somehow both end up in the playoff, which is, I guess, possible, what I'm seeing week in, week out in college football is it just seems like the gap between the top 4 teams, take the old playoff system where the top 4 make it. I think there's less of a gap between the top 5 or so and then the next 15. And I admit, I didn't believe this was going to be true when NIL started. And there were some people, I don't know if I would call them progressive thinking people, that theorized that if enough teams get into the NIL game, it will level the playing field. It will not separate only make the rich richer. I think we found some examples of that. I mean, no better one than Vanderbilt able to beat Alabama. I don't think that was even thinkable. But I guess if everybody's paying money in the power conferences, it does level the playing field. It gives you a chance to compete. So I would go as far as to say not only getting into the playoffs, but also in the competition to get the bye in the first round. I thought, D-Mace, we would see the first round of the playoffs with a lot of mismatches because of the automatic bids and things like that. I no longer think that. I think the college football playoff now, because the parity is a little more than it was, they're going to be unbelievable. I don't think we're going to see as many blowouts as I thought if you would have had this system 10 years ago.
No, I don't think that, because you're able now to go out and pay players. Before, when it was done at the table, and you feared about getting caught and having to deal with the repercussions from there. But now that everything's on the table, it has allowed some of these teams that probably couldn't compete on a week in, week out basis, now they can compete. But it also on the flip side of that, it is taking these teams that have been good, and then all of a sudden, they want to go out and get players, and then it don't work, i.e.
Right.
Ole Miss.
Exactly. That's the flip side is the rich teams that are throwing money at a lot of players. It doesn't always work well.
Exactly. Absolutely. So I look at this game because I think each team has its own problem. Obviously, Alabama's defense is nothing like we are accustomed seeing from an Alabama defense. On the flip side, UT's defense is something we haven't seen, in the last 3-4 seasons from a defense. This is probably the best defense in all of college football, considering their schedule and everything else, what they've been able to do. It's been UT's offense. And I think a lot of people thought that once you added Nico, you got some good wide receivers, your running game seems to be okay, this offense would take another step under Heupel. It hasn't taken that step. It seems like they've taken a few steps back since Hendon Hooker days. And that was 2 years ago. So Alabama's problem is their defense, and they can't protect Milroe. And Tennessee's problem is their offense. They can't consistently put up points.
The Alabama defense in particular, if you look at the Georgia game, the Vanderbilt game, and the South Carolina game, it just doesn't look like your traditional Alabama defense. They are really having trouble at the line of scrimmage. They're having trouble really in all areas, third downs. It's baffling. It's got to be to Alabama fans to watch them struggle like that, because they're just not physically dominating games like they have for the last couple decades.
And that's the difference in college football, I believe, is that you can have a bunch of really good players, but if you don't have that one guy that connects them all, they're going to struggle. One thing Coach Saban did excellent is he made sure everyone was connected. The offense understood why the defense was doing what they were doing, and the defense understood why the offense was doing what they were doing. There was no disconnect between either side. It seems like there's a disconnect between Alabama's offense and Alabama's defense.
Agreed.
Both of these teams are coming into this game having very similar performances over the past 2 weeks. We know Alabama lost here to Vanderbilt and then escaped South Carolina the following week.
That wasn't just an escape. That was a Houdini. They tried every which way to cough it up. Like, that was like, if you just draw up how much madness can we create in the last quarter? I mean, they tried everything. The onside kick, the 2-point conversion. I mean, there was all of that stuff. I don't know how they won.
So Alabama loses to Vanderbilt. They follow that up with a win, but a nail-biting win, to say the least, against South Carolina. Tennessee loses to Arkansas 2 weeks ago and needed overtime to beat Florida, which I certainly didn't expect. I thought Tennessee would be able to handle them, to the fact that, and take it to the bank last week, I said that Tennessee would win by at least 17 points. That definitely did not happen. But both of these teams are coming into this game on shaky ground, which adds another layer of intrigue to this matchup, which would have been intriguing by itself because of the caliber of teams. But when you consider how they've played over the past 2 weeks and the implications that it could have on the college football playoff, I mean, it certainly seems like a must-watch game this weekend.
Yeah, and it's not for the reasons that you thought, but for everything you put out there, because they don't look like juggernauts, right? They're both ranked pretty well, and there's that perception of these are teams that could contend for a title, but they've looked like anything but that the last few weeks.
Yeah, well, we will see this type of game, because it's the expanded playoffs was, sort of touted as this, playoff that now you can get 4 SEC teams in, or 4 Big Ten teams in, or sort of geared more toward the Power 4, because there's no longer Power 5. But what it's looking like is it may not be that way. It's not an automatic that you're going to get 4 teams out the SEC or 4 teams out of the Big Ten. A lot of it is because, frankly, they're going to beat each other up. And I don't think the teams that actually like left the Pac-12 or the Pac whatever it is now, I don't think they really understood what it was going to mean by you leaving your conference, going to the Big Ten or the SEC. I don't think y'all really truly thought about it outside of the money aspect, because now it's a dogfight every week and y'all are going to beat each other up. And to get a 3-loss team in, it's going to be hard. To get a 2-loss team in, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, you got to have some things fall
So my
your
thing
way.
is, now that I look at it, why would you? I get why they left, SC and all those teams, Oregon, because of the money, but it would have been a little bit easier.
I asked that
had
question
you
when
stayed in the
thing happened. I said,
Pac-12.
I ask yourself this question: did your school just have their chances get better or worse of winning a national title? And I think in a lot of cases it got harder,
Exactly,
and not easier. And I think that's a great example. I will say this too, and we'll come back to this at 1:00 with Mitch. We talk college football. Just having watched Alabama's last 3 games, I cannot believe they are favored on the road at Tennessee. That's just my gut.
-3.
-3.
I checked.
I just don't see that. Now, Tennessee, I know Tennessee fans will, well, they got issues too, and I see that as well. But Alabama does not look like a team that can go to Tennessee and be the favorite. They have major weaknesses to me.
Hey, maybe somebody will choose that game in silly underdog picks tomorrow at noon. We shall see. 615-737-1025. We'll get into the Titans coming up next. Jonathan Hutton will join us at 12:20. Join 1025, 1063 The Game and Joe Dubin from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. this Saturday at Hope Fest 2024, a family-friendly festival, say that 10 times fast, celebrating hope found in the faith and recovery community. The event will be held at the Bethel Church of the Nazarene at 455 Broadmoor Drive in Nashville from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. with free food, games for the kids, mental health and recovery resources available. The Tennessee Titans Alumni Association will be on hand with their vaccination clinic. More details at thegamenashville.com/events. D Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063. The Game. On this beautiful Wednesday, we're broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, and Adam Vingan here with you. So yesterday in the NFL, we saw two major trades involving wide receivers. We saw Davante Adams move from Las Vegas to New York to reunite with Aaron Rodgers, and we saw Amari Cooper traded from the Cleveland Browns to the Buffalo Bills. He will make his Bills debut on Sunday against the Tennessee Titans, and we'll talk a little bit more about that matchup this hour. But Willie, you asked an interesting question yesterday off air about the wide receiver market. Now that Davante Adams and Amari Cooper are no longer available, does that make DeAndre Hopkins the most desirable, widely believed to be available, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say.
The best left on
Yes.
the market.
Yes, there.
Yeah. I think that's what I
said
was thinking.
Widely believed wide receiver. It was just too many wides in there. But my point is, you were asking the question if DeAndre Hopkins was the best available wide receiver believed to be on the trade market. There I go. Got it. Now that Amari Cooper and Davante Adams are off the board. And I did some research. I looked at a lot of different lists of people that I feel like would know the answer to this question. And I think the answer might be yes.
Here's how I look at it, D Mace.
Mhm.
I think if, because Adams sent some lists, there's still some guys out there. But now that you take these big names off the board that have been dealt, I think you can look at different years in different sports and see this happen sometimes. When there are 3 or 4 guys out there and the teams are saying, well, if we don't get A, we'll get B. And if we don't get B, well, there's still C and D. Now that A and B are gone, or A, B, and C are gone, D looks really good. And the D would be DeAndre Hopkins here. So I think you could have the remaining teams that still want a wide receiver. Let's just throw Kansas City. Let's throw Pittsburgh. I think that ups the market for Hopkins. And here's what I like about Hopkins. This is what I want your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he can morph into more offenses than some of these guys on the list. Like, I think Hopkins has been in different spots. We know his skill set, but I think he could find his place in a new system. So if I'm a team, I'm like, can he learn our stuff? He's a veteran. He's seen it all. We know what he can do. I think he could make that adjustment. I think that makes him more attractive.
Yeah, I don't think he can't make the adjustment whatever team he goes to. It's just, is he open to the possibility of being traded? Or, and I thought about this because, I listened to Chase and Big Joe, and they had who did they have on from Houston? John
McClain?
Yeah, John McClain. They had John McClain on. They asked, and it was sort of the same lines. They were just asking about D-Hop, and John McClain sort of gave his take on D-Hop and who he believes D-Hop is at this point, and I agree with him. D-Hop is more of a possession receiver. He's more of a third down guy, third and short, third and medium, or red zone guy. The Titans aren't using him that way in the red zone. I don't know why they haven't used him that way in the last 2 years he's been here. I don't know why they haven't done that, but it is what it is. But I'm not sure D-Hop wants to leave. That's the thing. Does he want to leave? And this is the part that I need to just, say I can't expect everyone to think like me. And I've been told that a long time ago. My ex-wife told me that. My mom told me that. You can't expect people to think the way you would think or do things the way you would do things if I was disappointed in something that happened.
That's an important life lesson
Exactly.
for everybody out there.
Absolutely. So I'm not sure he wants to leave. I think he's comfortable where he's at.
And I do have a report to that effect that I want to share from Jeremy Fowler. He and Dan Graziano do a weekly notebook on ESPN.com. And at the bottom, they just kind of, what do we call it in the journalism business? Like dump out the notebook, like whatever loose ends we have, they don't make for a full story, but they're interesting nonetheless. You just dump out the notebook. And this is what Jeremy Fowler wrote about the Kansas City Chiefs in particular, but it involves DeAndre Hopkins. He says, quote, "The receiver depleted Chiefs haven't been overly aggressive on the market to this point. As was told to me, Coach Andy Reid values receivers who either have played in his system or know it well. Finding a plug-and-play situation isn't always clear-cut. That said, Kansas City will stay nimble. The Chiefs liked DeAndre Hopkins in 2023 free agency, but Tennessee isn't eager to deal him as of now, and he likes playing in Tennessee. I don't get the sense he's angling to get out of there."
And but this brings me to that central question, and this is why I will always be a Barry Trotz guy, no matter what. They can lose from here on ever until hockey ends, which they're not going to do. I don't want them to do that, but I am a Barry guy. You know why? Because Barry was up front. Don't bring your ass here to retire. I don't want you to come here to retire. I don't want you to come here because Nashville's this nice city and you can just sit back and be calm. No, come here to win hockey games. That's what I want you to do. And you may want to end up living here. That's great. But I'm bringing you here because you want to win games. D-Hop hasn't been to the playoffs in 3 years. Haven't sniffed the playoff in 3 years. If you're comfortable with staying here, you don't want to win. That's the way I look at it. And that may not be him. I'm just saying that.
That's how it looks like from your end.
Yeah, that's how it looks like for me. You're comfortable with Nashville. You possibly want to retire because everybody says Nashville's a wonderful place, which it is. But you're comfortable now. They like you over at the building. You are one of few bright spots on the team.
He's doing exactly what
He's
they're
doing
paying him
what
to
they're
do.
paying him to do. Is you throw the ball to me, I'll catch it. I think you're comfortable with where you're at now. And I could be completely wrong. You're comfortable. You've gotten a taste of Nashville. Now you feel, I like Nashville. It's a good place. I don't want to go anywhere else. Maybe I could be wrong. Maybe I'm not. I can't think that people think like me because I wouldn't want to end my career in a spot where I knew I had no chance at going to the playoffs. And that's where the Titans sit right now. I love that organization, but I'm being honest. They are in a position where they will not make the playoffs until something drastically changes. If something drastically changes this season. They didn't make it last year. Hop was a part of it. He saw the struggles. It doesn't seem like they're going to make it this year because they're having the same old struggles, it seemed like, again. But when you hear things like that, he may be, how can you ever get comfortable with losing? And I'm not saying that's him, but it makes
the perception.
Yeah, the perception. You're okay.
Well, you have a report. You have
Exactly.
a report from a national reporter that's got some cachet saying exactly what you're saying.
It's like I can understand the Titans may not want to move in a sense right now, but as a player, you're looking at the landscape. You don't want to ruffle any feathers. But like I said the other day, you go to your agent like, hey, if there's an opportunity for me to go somewhere, because this is not whether I like the team or don't like the team, like the city or don't like it. It's about me ending my career somewhere where I can win and get that thing which has eluded me for the last 10 years. That's a Super Bowl or even an opportunity to get to a Super Bowl. Do I want to end my last year? Because it may just be the end of this year.
Look, I don't know why that would affect whether the Titans would like to trade DeAndre Hopkins. They should be exploring this where they are. My question would be, if this perception is out there, how does that affect what a team would trade for DeAndre Hopkins? And that's a big thing, right? That's where you got to get on the horn to the agent and you got to vet that.
Yeah.
Right. You got to say, hey, I need to know, is your guy hungry to win a title with our team? Because I'm not going to give up a big asset to get him if he's just going to say, well, I'd rather stay in Nashville.
Exactly.
You don't want that guy on your team if that's the case.
I don't want to.
And we don't know this, but if that perception is out there, I would want to put that fire out.
Exactly. And I'm not
saying, if I'm the Titans, I wouldn't want that out there.
No.
That, D-Hop, he loves staying here. We love D-Hop.
He doesn't matter what's going on. And listen, I don't want to make it seem like that's what he wants. I'm not saying that. And I'm not asking for D-Hop to do what Calvin Ridley did and voice his frustrations, because that's what it would be, his frustrations. But when a report out there, when a report comes out that alludes to that, you think like, can that possibly be true? Like, I understand you love Nashville. That's good. But you should love winning more than you love Nashville. Point blank. You should love winning more than you love Nashville.
You can always come back.
Yeah, that's what Barry was saying. You should love winning more than you love the city of Nashville. You can come and retire. That's fine afterwards. But you should love winning, or you should prioritize winning over a city. And something like that would allude to him valuing the mediocrity or below that.
I was about to say, I think it's worse than mediocrity at this point.
or worse than that. So you possibly can deal with that because you enjoy the city so much. I hope that's not him. I really do. I'm not saying it's him, but you have a report like that come out, and then it's like, dude, like something's eventually gonna happen here. Like if I was him, I wouldn't make anything public. I wouldn't. But I would go to my agent like, hey, listen, I want to end my career. If this is my last year or next year or 2 years, I want to end it somewhere where I know I have a legitimate shot at winning a Super Bowl or at least getting into the playoffs. And it goes to your question, Willie, of them telling everyone this is a rebuild or not. They can't tell D-Hop is a rebuild. Why? At least last year, because I don't think he would have came, or I hope he wouldn't have come if he would have said, "It's going to be a rebuild."
And I think last year was very different than this year with what they were trying to accomplish from the outset of the season. They were still trying to hang on to Derrick Henry and Byard and Tannehill, and I think for D-Hop, he saw that. He's like, "Well, this team's won a lot of games. But I've seen it, so I can help them stay in contention."
But here's the funny part
this team is different. This team was always going to be different.
But here's the funny part about it. This year's team is better than last year's team, I think. If you just look at who they have.
As it turns out, that's what they hoped. I don't know if that's
But I'm saying
as
far as personnel-wise, this team is better than last year's team.
At certain positions.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
But as a whole, the offensive line is better than they were last year, at least the left side. The whole offensive line was bad last year. At least the left side is a side that we have promise in. We could look at J.C. Latham and Cush and Skoronski, even though he needs to get better, and say, okay, they are doing better than what the left side did last year. Even the right side, Leroy Watson, he played much better than Nicholas PT.
To be fair, the bar was on the floor.
I understand the bar was on the floor.
And I would
but
say
he did play better.
Radunz has been, I think, somewhat a pleasant surprise.
And then
Dylan Radunz, if he doesn't stay here after this year, he's gonna get a job somewhere.
And then you look at the receiving core. You can't tell me the receiving core this year isn't better than the receiving core last year.
Yes. On paper, certainly.
Absolutely. You look at the secondary. On paper, it's a better secondary this year than it was last year. So if that is indeed the case, to me, personnel-wise, this is a better team than what they were last year. But the record doesn't indicate it.
615-737-1025. We'll continue to take your thoughts all show long on the future of DeAndre Hopkins in Tennessee. There are also other players that the Titans could trade who are on expiring contracts, and we'll continue to discuss that if the Titans season heads in that direction. But of course, DeAndre Hopkins, the number one target on the board as it relates to Tennessee. We'll talk about all of this with Jonathan Hutton next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
I'm just looking at it. Okay. So Callahan is doing his press conference here. Yeah. Did he just start late?
The Iron Goddess all-female show is coming to Nashville, Tennessee, November 9th. Meet us at the fairgrounds as female riders from all over the world will be in attendance. Come out and see some of these beautiful custom bikes. You thought I was going to talk about the women, didn't you? No, I'm talking about the bikes, people. From choppers to mini bikes, from cruisers to sport bikes, all makes and models are encouraged to come. Get your tickets now at IronGoddessMotorcycleShow.com. That's IronGoddessMotorcycleShow.com. show.com. Enjoy a day of live music, vendor village, tasty food, and some more, and so much more. Show off your bike in one of their many competitions and win cash prizes. All spectators are welcome, and kids under 16 are free with paid tickets. So get yours today. That's the Iron Goddess Motorcycle Tour is headed to Music City, Nashville, Tennessee on November 9th. So get your tickets. Go to the website. Again, it's IronGoddessMotorcycleShow.com. We'll see you there.
D Mace, Vingen, and Donick, 1025, 1063, the game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingen. Some news to pass along from Tennessee Titans head coach Brian Callahan. Tajay Spears won't practice today. He's week to week with a hamstring injury, if I recall correctly. Coburn is out for practice, likely for the game, according to Paul Kaharski. Also, according to Paul Kaharski, the Titans are working through things with Jamal Adams, who's been put on the non-football injury list. And Derek, listening to you discuss that with Teron Davenport during the pregame show, it certainly sounds like there's just maybe like a difference in opinion on his usage as to why he's now out for 4 games.
Yeah, it's weird because the Titans didn't say anything about injury in regards to Jamal Adams. I know, that was one of the things when they first brought him here. Is he healthy? Because he hadn't played, because he has missed games. But during camp, it was like, okay, we're going to hold him out, make sure he's completely healthy. He barely practiced along with a few other guys that barely practice. But at the beginning of the season, they did not make it seem like he was still dealing with an injury. So with that being said, I wonder what's really going on. Like,
is it a bruised ego?
I don't know what it
perhaps?
is. You brought this guy in to help out with your secondary. And as Willie has informed me, which I did know, but forgot Diggs, what is his status for this upcoming game? Because he did leave last game with
he
an
had
injury.
that collision early
Yeah.
with the tight end where it looked like he ran into a brick wall.
Exactly.
But is he okay? I haven't seen them mention him at the press conference today yet.
Exactly. So is he playing?
I don't
is he
know.
practicing? Is he limited?
Well, I guess my point is, if Adams is playing so well, it's not like they have Ronnie Lott and
Exactly.
Kevin Byard at his all-pro form and like these great safeties that are keeping him from getting. I would feel like a guy who is playing at the level he thinks he's playing at, they would find a way to get him on the field.
But here, what you about to say, Adam?
I say we have Jonathan Hutton, who's been waiting
Oh,
patiently. Let's bring Hutton into this
It's Hutton o'clock.
conversation.
Yes,
We're just a little bit late.
The music. Yes.
Sorry,
You guys
sorry,
are good.
Hutton.
I was enjoying this. It's a great conversation.
Well, Derek, why don't you continue?
Yeah, okay.
Continue now that we
And
have
that- yes.
Hutton in the conversation. Now, please continue your thoughts.
Exactly. And this question is directed, to you, Hut. The whole Adams thing is mind-boggling to me. It's baffling to me because because you brought a guy in, you talked him up. He was going to be a part of this defense once he got fully healthy, and it seemed like as camp started to end, he was fully healthy. He was ready to go. He played some plays here and there during the season, but then you put him on a list that doesn't indicate that he's physically unable to play for you. You owe your fans. You owe your fans an explanation why this is happening. Because if you're 4-0, okay, you don't. But you haven't won. You won one game, and your defense last week didn't look as good toward the end of the game, and you got one of your safeties down. You need to explain to your fans why Adams isn't playing. Why is he on that list when he's not hurt?
He has 20 defensive snaps this season. by the way,
Exactly.
just for
So they need to explain to their fans
4
why
tackles.
is he a guy that you brought in, you talked about, that can help your defense. He's not hurt. So why isn't he playing?
Man, so it could also be that he's frustrated by the lack of playing time.
Yeah.
It felt he could contribute more, but he's played one snap against the Dolphins. That's the last time we saw him. And then it happens over the bye week. See, I'm reading into that direction, Mace. And let me, as you guys were talking to open the segment, let me throw this out there. I don't get the sense that Calvin Ridley would have said what he said, fair or not for me to bring this up, with Mike Vrabel as the head coach. I think this is a locker room that will point fingers eventually. And I think that is a massive problem.
which is something that Derek has been preaching for weeks.
So
about
no doubt.
the fracturing of the locker room.
And Mace, you know this is especially from the receiver standpoint, right? Like you want the ball. You're paid to get the ball. Give me the ball. But I mean, even Jeffrey Simmons, some of his comments post game have been more about where the defensive line played well. Sacks don't matter, but we're getting pressure on the quarterback and Joe Flacco. I mean, I'm reading into that maybe too much, but at the same time, I don't see a locker room that is going to be as cohesive with the direction and mindset that we've seen this offseason as much as it was about being tough, not as fun, but tough, physical, focused, and all about the team mantra. You know what I mean? Like repeating the same thing every week. Those types of leaders are gone, and you have to have other guys step up. And the fact that the quarterback hasn't done that, and you have a first-time head coach, and you have a young GM. I mean, this is it's a big road swing here for Brian Callahan on the road back-to-back Buffalo and Detroit to kind of keep things together after standing at a podium on Monday and saying that he liked what he heard from those that gave their opinion on where things are going crazy.
Yeah, they're gonna have to figure something out.
Am I wrong? Am I reading too much into that?
I don't think you are, because slowly we are starting to hear things come out of this building. And I said this was going to happen if they continued to lose. If Will Levis couldn't, turn whatever he was doing around, I said eventually there's going to start being cracks in the armor. And the crack started with Jeffrey Simmons saying something a few weeks ago. Now it's Calvin Ridley. Now it's Jeffrey Simmons again. Talking about the defensive line, and sacks are not everything. And I understand him from that standpoint, but they paid you and they went out and get big Devondre Sweat. Why? To create sacks.
Yeah.
And y'all haven't created outside of Harold Landry, and people want to trade him away. That's an asinine suggestion. And he's the only person that's getting sacked. But beside Harold Landry, no one else is getting to the quarterback.
Yeah, and at least in Simmons' defense, from where I sit, at least he's discussing some type of production that he's a part of. Ridley's discussing the fact that he doesn't have production and why. There's a difference there. And let me also throw Jamal Adams into this too. This is why I thought of this. Why I heard you guys talk. I mean, he's on the non-football injury list, so this has nothing to do with whatever injury he came in with that hip since training camp. He missed the season opener. This is the non-football injury is a reserve list that the team can have for something that happens, off the field.
Hold on. Hey, Hut, let me ask you this, and I'm going to pass it off to the other two guys. Do you think, and listen, this is just a question. It's not a suggestion.
He's just asking questions, folks.
Sure.
He's just
I'm
asking
asking
questions.
a question.
That's what happens when you're 1-4.
Exactly. Do you think that Brian Callahan is over his head, or he's over his skis, and he doesn't know how to deal quite with these egos that he has in that room, whether it be Calvin Ridley, Jefferson? And I'm gonna go back to what Joe said, even though I didn't agree with Big Joe when he said it about the whole Jeffrey Simmons, going at the reporter at Buck, and then starting fights, and he did not kick him out of practice. He did not squash it. Maybe, just maybe, is he over his head in this?
I don't think so. Because he's got, number one, he has a veteran coaching staff around him. That's number one. That's been there and done that in situations like this, just like you have been in those locker rooms, Mace. Number two, he was in a pretty badass locker room in Cincinnati, right? Like he's dealt with egos before, so I'm not afraid to say that I think he's prepared to deal with some of the stars of the league. I think more than he is over his head, I think his hands are tied. I mean, this really, for him, if you look at the offense, this really swung after that Green Bay game. That with the offensive line, and that's the turning point for Callahan. How many sacks they gave up, the adjustments that were made against him. Things have looked different since that game. And it's more of the same. They've got to run the football. They're afraid to throw it, either because of Levis or because of their offensive line. It's going to just give them no shot. But think about the last 2 weeks, based on their game plan, coming off of the Green Bay game, they've allowed 1 sack. And 3 games ago was the Packers. The entire conversation after the Green Bay week was about how bad the offensive line played. And the 2 games, after allowing 1 sack, they've thrown for less than 200 yards combined, and they're averaging 4.3 yards per pass attempt, which is a full yard less than the 31st ranked offense. So I think, the presser on Monday, I know you guys listened to it, that was a very different tone from a coach that has stood up there and said, and talked positivity. And I felt like I always had a optimistic outlook. This was more about, he was tongue-tied with some of the answers to questions that he received, and he was thinking through how to word and phrase things in a way that wasn't just straight up being honest or maybe lying to the media or to the fans about what's going on here, admitting the conservative game plan. He's got there's more questions than there are answers, and they felt like they went into the season with more answers than what they felt like they would get in the offseason. It's an interesting point of the season for him, I'm saying, because look, let's be honest with this whole thing. why did John Robinson get fired? I think the majority of people would point to A.J. Brown. I point to the offensive line. And with the upgrades that they felt like they have made this offseason on the offensive line and the struggles that they've had on the right side, they know that they have to protect the quarterback that Amy Adams-Strunk has pointed out in her statement with what they're doing moving forward as an organization. So first and foremost, they can't give up the league in sacks and have their quarterback hurt before they have the evaluation. And the evaluation seems to be over because of that.
Hut, where do you sit where they are right now about trading? I know D-Mace is dead set against it. We had a good debate on this yesterday.
Okay.
But, trading Harold Landry and DeAndre Hopkins. But let's start with Landry, because that one, D-Mace thinks that Landry can be a positive force for the next few years, which I think is the central question. Can he be on the next? Can he be a big part of the next good Titans team, knowing that his contract, he's one of the most expensive players they have on the roster right now?
How many years does Landry have left now?
According to SpotRack, I think he's got 2 more years after this. There is an out, according to SpotRack, and I think that's their assessment of it. I don't know if that's something that's actually in the contract, but you could pay, I think, $13 million of dead money to get out of it. But his cap hit over the next 2 years after this is something like $24 million.
Yeah, so
it would have to be addressed, I think. Yeah.
I mean, he's one of their success stories. And for this organization, I'm saying, he's about to be the all-time leader in sacks, I believe, for the Titans, surpassing. I'm saying that from the edge position, for what he's done, passing Derek Morgan coming up, I believe. Point being, Willie, they should, looking back, I think if you ask Rand Carthon about what they did this offseason, looking back on last year, would they go back and trade Derrick Henry? Would they trade Tannehill? All the other, they trade Byard. I think looking back on what they didn't do last year and wanting and knowing that Chad Brinker, through the piece that Paul Kuharsky did at his site, paulkuharsky.com, he wants as many picks as possible. I mean, I think all players are on the table depending on how things go on this road swing. I mean, at 1-6 going into the trade deadline, why wouldn't you try to build up draft capital? The thing though is they don't have many players that are going to drive the price up. I think Hopkins could actually bring the most interest.
You think more than Landry?
Well, I don't know if I would trade you though in my answer.
Okay. You're closer to
if you trade Landry, you open up another glaring piece to the puzzle. They need another pass rusher anyway next draft. They've got to find that guy. And if you don't find him in the draft, you're signing someone you're probably paying more than what you're going to pay Landry. So, and Landry's productive. I'm saying he's a solution, not a question. So I'm keeping him in my pocket. Although, again, you could blow me away with a trade offer, but I don't know at the trade deadline how many teams are just blown away with an offer that they can't refuse on a player that they would like to keep. Hopkins is different with the expiring contract and the fact that you're probably not bringing him back because you'll draft a younger receiver. If you wanted to bring him back, you would have extended him during training camp. So I think that's certainly on the table, and I think Hopkins wants to go win. I don't blame him if he wants to go win the way Derrick Henry did. A lot is determined just solely based on the needs of other teams. Wide receiver is going to be a premium.
Hutton, before we let you go, we were discussing the upcoming game between Alabama and Tennessee. I loved what Chase used to describe that game during his show. He called it a loser leaves town match. It certainly feels like the loser of this game. Well, let me rephrase that. Does the loser of this game do their college football playoff chances go up in smoke?
Yes, just like LSU Ole Miss last week. That's the way I view this game. It's a loser leave town elimination game. The college football playoff has started for the SEC. You got 6 teams with 1 loss, 9 teams with 2. And you look around the country, Adam, and you see the Big 12, the chase for the Big 12 championship is going to be nuts with the teams that they have sitting there and all the possibilities. I mean, you could pick BYU, but you can make a case for 5 other programs if you wanted to. Meanwhile, you have the scenario of Clemson meeting Miami, an unbeaten Miami, and Clemson winning, and whether or not that would get 2 teams for the ACC in. And then the Big Ten is once again top heavy in terms of playoff, but then there's the sneaky Indiana that has not been tested in terms of the top 3 teams, but they get Ohio State coming up relatively soon, I think. So again, there's scenarios in the college football landscape right now that is crazy. And Texas has Georgia, but then has a sneaky, interesting schedule towards the end of the year that we didn't expect. Where's the SEC sit in all of this? And if you think I predicted 5 would get in preseason. I don't think there's 5 now, just based on how the other conferences are playing out and how much weight is going to be put on the conference championship games. Upsets in the conference championship games will keep better teams out, I believe, just top to bottom teams, because of the success of what has taken place on that weekend. And you have some of the top teams in the conference fall on those weekends, and all of a sudden those teams are still in. They're hosting games, but they're not getting the bye.
Now, Hud, quickly before we get you out of here, we got about a minute. Should Lane Kiffin be on the hot seat?
Oh, that's a great question. The answer is no, though. I mean, who do you replace him with, Mace?
But he brought all these guys. He used the NIL, and this was supposed to be the season that he get his team. They opened it up for Lane Kiffin to get his team in, and you still not gonna get in?
I don't think he's on the hot seat. They just ponied up and actually met the ante with the $9 million plus. There's a lot of average coaches.
So okay, let's say that.
There's a lot of average coaches getting paid tons of money.
Let me say this: if he was at somewhere outside of Ole Miss, if he's at Texas, or if he's at Bama, or if he's at Ohio State, would he be on a hot seat?
I think he's probably in the playoff. just based on more money spent at some positions and just the overall depth of what he's going to inherit. But yeah, I mean, I think if he's outside of the SEC, he's in the playoff. Let me also add in. I mean, Lincoln Riley's about to be with the way things are going at SC, and if he's not, he will be going into next year. But the only way Kiffin leaves is if he gets another gig that he wants, and Ole Miss could then effectively get rid of him by not matching the contract the way they did whenever he was flirting with Auburn back then.
Jonathan,
or last year, whenever with Alabama, just having his name mentioned. He will have his name mentioned, that's for sure.
Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow joining us as he does every Wednesday afternoon. Hutton, thanks for chatting. We'll talk next week.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I think Billy Napier should have gone for 2, by the way.
Well, it probably would have won the game.
Thanks, Hutton. 615-737-1025. I do want to get back into the DeAndre Hopkins conversation because I stumbled across an interesting article about the value of wide receivers and in-season trades. And that could give us a glimpse of what DeAndre Hopkins could be worth for the Tennessee Titans if they were to trade him. We'll do that next. Tomorrow, it's your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click. If you correctly guess a Preds player that scores a goal in the game tomorrow night, you win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Preds home game. Participate with Robbie and Rexroad tomorrow morning at 8:45.
Football is back for another week, and what better way to bet on the big games than on Zen Sports, the new sportsbook in Tennessee that is bringing sports betting to a whole new level, and I mean that literally. People, when you sign up for Zen Sports, you'll automatically earn up to $100, no danger first wager. If your first bet loses, you'll be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $100. And now that football season has started, Zen Sports has launched their revamped betting platform for both college football and the NFL. And what's better, with their new look, Zen Sports will be offering daily promotions, including odd boosts, same-game parlays, no-danger wagers, and much more. Zen Sports also offers a one-of-a-kind VIP reward program. If you qualify, you'll earn monthly comps at sporting events, concerts, and even sports book bonuses. The VIP program is by invite only, so if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for the VIP consideration, check out the program details and apply at zensports.com/VIP. So what are you waiting for, football fans? Start betting with Zen Sports, where you will receive true odds on all parlays and an enhanced user experience for all. Get going and download their app at zensports.com today. That's Zen Sports, where betting just got better. And remember, gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
Nashville's best deal this week is Staley's Chicago Italian Dining right here in Nashville. Winners of numerous Best of awards, this is truly one of the best kept secrets in Nashville. Staley's Chicago Italian Dining brings amazing Italian food to the South, including original Italian beef sandwiches, Vienna Chicago-style hot dogs, and the best gyros south of Chicago. That's right, gyros, not gyros. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals now to get half off of a $20 gift card while supplies last. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, and Adam Vingan here with you. Lee is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com with a Titans comment. Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious. You guys were talking about trying to find the edge rusher. And why don't the Titans trade a draft pick for Josh Allen from the Jaguars? He's an aggressive pass rusher, and we've seen his history at UK. Pretty much Kentucky's leading sack rusher. So why can't they consider that trade?
Thanks, Lee. I think Lee, what we were getting at was the discussion about Harold Landry.
Mhm.
And Derek's point was, if you trade Harold Landry, and Hutton made the same point as well. If you trade Harold Landry, you're going to have to find someone to fill that spot. It's not that the Titans are looking for a pass rusher. It's if they were to trade the one they have, they would need another one.
Mhm.
I can't imagine any scenario where the Titans are buying at the trade deadline at 1-4 and could soon be 1-6. I think it was more of the point that if the Titans were to trade Harold, and by the way, the genesis of this discussion, which I thank Joe Rexroad for filling 2 segments of our show yesterday.
Mhm.
Joe Rexroad suggested on Tuesday that the Titans consider trading Harold Landry to the Lions to replace Aiden Hutchinson, who's injured and out for the season. And that led to plenty of discussion on our program. I heard Paul Kaharski and Joe Rexroad debate it earlier this morning. Always a good time to listen to those two guys in the same studio. But that was the point, Lee, was that the Titans aren't looking for an edge rusher, but if they were to trade Harold Landry, then they would need one.
They would need 2.
They would need
Right.
They would
have
need
to
more
go out
than
and
they
do
would
that.
need more.
That
than
is
one.
a good point that I had not really thought of when I was debating this
Mhm.
yesterday. And you're right, because it's like when a team like the Pirates or a smaller market team in baseball has a really good pitcher,
Mhm.
and they trade that pitcher for a bunch of prospects. That's what everybody says. Okay, fine, you're not paying that pitcher, but what happens as soon as you trade that guy? You're looking for the next guy,
Exactly.
and it's hard to find those guys. So I do think there's merit in that discussion. I do think that and Hutt said it, if you get a really good offer, a desperate team that's willing to overpay, I do think you got to consider it. I wouldn't do it for a 5th round pick or something, but if it's really up there, and I don't think you could get a first, I think we all agree with that.
Mhm.
But if somebody really intrigues you, just where you are right now, I think you have to look at it.
Well,
I think I would do it if it's super enticing.
Mhm.
But I get that you can't just give them away and say, we just need a draft pick.
yeah, if you offer me a first or second, then I'm like, okay, we need to talk now. We seriously
I don't
need
think
to
it'll be a
talk.
first, but a
Yeah.
second
I
would be
can't
interesting.
recall
A
whether
second would be
it
really
was-
interesting.
So we've mentioned the moves that the Commanders made last
Mhm.
season. They traded Montez Sweat and Chase Young. I can't recall which one netted a 2nd round pick. I think
It might have
was-
been Chase Young.
I think it was Young who went to the 49ers and now he's with the Saints. Let's use Joe's example. If the Lions call and say, "Hey, we need to replace Aiden Hutchinson. We really like Harold Landry. We will give you a 2nd round pick." Now it'll be presumably a lower 2nd round pick because the Lions, if things go their way, will, make it to the end. But we will give you a 2nd round pick for Harold Landry. I mean, can you pass up a 2nd round pick for Harold
I
Landry?
don't think you could pass it up, but you can ask for something else, or you can ask for conditional second that could potentially be a first.
Right, like
You
if
know?
the Lions win the Super Bowl
Exactly.
with Harold Landry, that
Mhm.
2nd round pick becomes a 1st round pick.
Exactly, because you can't say, you can say if they make it to the NFC Championship game, but they've done that already. So if they make it to the Super Bowl with Harold Landry,
win the Super Bowl.
or win, then it's a conditional 1st round pick. I can get that. But Hutt brought up something, and he texted me right after he got off, but he brought up something interesting, and I don't think we sort of looked at it from that standpoint. Vrabel didn't want to trade guys last year. He didn't at all, and that was Rand's first year. So I think Rand was sort of, placating to Vrabel and playing like, I'm just gonna play the nice guy. I'm just gonna sit back and watch because this is my first year, and I'm not gonna trade. We traded Byard, but I'm not trading Henry, nor am I trading Tannehill because I'm just sitting back. Vrabel wants those guys. We gotta keep them. Well, Vrabel's not here anymore, and Brian Callahan has no say in that part, like the roster or his say it isn't as great as Vrabel's was last year. And Rand has shown he'll trade you. He'll trade you in a minute. He will trade you if he feels he needs to. So maybe we get to a point where it's not Callahan, because I think Callahan's hands are tied completely. It's Rand. So will Rand trade a Harold Landry? Will Rand trade a D-Hop? It's interesting because at the beginning of the season, when all this stuff came up about D-Hop, are you going to trade him? And Rand gave this answer. He wasn't committed. He was sort of non-committal in keeping him or whatnot, which made me, and I said at the time, that's an answer that tells me, yeah, I'll trade him if it came to it.
As he should.
As he should. But he gave the answer in a sort of,
He did.
we're not going to trade him, but
he almost got caught.
Exactly.
And it was kind of a young GM not able to pivot and get it. They tried to pin him down. I can't remember who was asking the question. He said that I've talked to him about that, and that's
D-Hop's happy here and this and that. But which makes me think, and I said when he answered it that way back then, I said, no, he'll trade him. He will trade him because he has no allegiance. Truly, he's trying to do what's best for the team, and not what's best for an individual.
If I were DeAndre Hopkins, I would have a suitcase packed and just keep it in my keep it
by the front door.
Yeah, just have a suitcase packed, because if this season continues as we expect it to, he's not going to be here. Like we did talk about that report from Jeremy Fowler about it doesn't appear, according to Fowler, that Hopkins is angling to get out of Tennessee. And this kind of goes to what we were talking about yesterday with Harold Landry, and what would that mean for the rest of the locker room? Well, it would mean that you guys didn't hold up your end of the bargain, so now guys that you like are going to leave. But if I were DeAndre Hopkins, I would have a getaway bag I packed. Just you never know when you're going to get that call, but I would have my duffel bag packed so I can hop on the plane, have all of my essentials, and get out of town. I mean,
get you some traveler size.
Yeah.
Toothpaste.
Go to Target, get that travel size toothpaste that never lasts more than a few days, and the travel spray deodorant and the travel baby powder, all that stuff. But if I were DeAndre Hopkins, I would certainly have my bag packed quickly. Adam in Portland on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Adam, go ahead.
Hop is the one dude where I'm like, I wish they would trade him. Like, I feel like he deserves so much more than what we're giving him. And it's sad because we want players like that in Tennessee. We want good players. But, like, even if you look back, D-Mace, the 2002 team started 1-4 and then went on that run all the way to the championship game. Like, this team has nobody that's studly enough to do something like that. We have no stars. Like Chris Johnson, there was a Titans team with Chris Johnson that started slow and reeled off like 8 in a row. So I don't believe in anybody enough on this team, and that sucks, man. I'm not saying it as like a hater. I'm saying it as like I'm so lost with this football. If you change the quarterback, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you change the quarterback. Would that be my solution? I don't know, but it lights a fire. It pumps some energy into the room. But I'm so lifeless with this team right now, dude.
Thanks, Adam.
That's why, Adam, listen, I don't know if D-Hop wants to get traded or not. Was he vocal when with the whole Houston thing? I think he was. I think he was not pleased with how the head coach and his relationship with the head coach was. Yeah.
Weren't he and Bill O'Brien?
Yeah, Bill O'Brien, they were butting heads. So I think
he
wanted out of there for that reason. Like, if you can't get along with your head coach, if y'all, butting heads, you got to, either one of y'all got to leave, either the head coach or yourself. They end up shipping him off to Arizona. It didn't seem like he wanted. Did he make a fuss about leaving Arizona or wanting to leave Arizona? I don't know if he did or not.
I don't recall.
So which makes me believe this, and I could be completely wrong. He's one of those dudes that he doesn't want to cause a fuss, and I get it. I understand it. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but he don't want to cause a fuss, and he's just going to go along to get along, or get along to go along. And hey, listen, I'm here. Y'all pay me to do a job. I'm going to do it. I like it. I'm not going to ruffle any feathers. Maybe he's that guy. Well, if you're that guy, then, hey, him staying here is no big prop, no big thing to him. But I go back again to the central question. Do you want to win football games? Plain and simple. Or are you that comfortable here, which is great. If you are comfortable here, there's nothing wrong with that. I get it. But do you want to win football games or do you want to be comfortable?
615-737-1025. We'll pick up the Titans conversation in a little bit. But first, our friend Mitch Light, who's back from his European vacation, will join us to talk college football. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, and Adam Vingan. 1025-1063. The Game.
Okay, let's talk Lee Company before we talk college football with Mitch Light. Lee Company, big sponsor of the Nashville Predators, who are back in action tomorrow night, still trying to get in that win column against the Edmonton Oilers. That's the place you want to be tomorrow night. What a game we are in store for them. And Lee Company is going to be right there with their sponsorship of our coverage here on 102.5 The Game, and you'll see them throughout Bridgestone Arena. Also, they've got you covered in your home. If you're a homeowner, have you had the heating unit checked? You probably were kicking on the heat last night. I know I did. And this is the time of year where it's only going to get cooler and then eventually cold. So if your heat is not working properly or maybe not as efficiently as it should, maybe you haven't had it checked in a while, check in with Lee Company. They can absolutely help you. Go online and make an appointment at leecompany.com or just give them a call. Get on the Vine. If people like to still call people, 615-567-1000. It's Lee Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
D-Mace, Finken, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, and back from his, correct me if I'm wrong here, Italian vacation. Mitch Light of The Athletic joins us to discuss college football. It was Italy, right, Mitch?
Let's go with the European vacation.
Okay.
It was Madrid, Barcelona, and Florence. I'm very cultured now.
Love Florence. Love
Wow.
Florence.
Move over,
Florence
move
is
over,
leading another
Griswold.
show, Derek.
The lights are
What'd
going
you-
on a
what'd
European
you say, Mitch?
vacation.
Florence is incredible.
Oh, I love Florence. I love Florence.
So what you're saying is you left the country, had the time of your life, and Vanderbilt defeated a top 5 team for the first time in program history. I don't think that's a coincidence.
So
I
would you
had
take that
double-checked
trip
the
back
effect.
to be here at the
Never
stadium?
come back to the country. You know, just stay where you are.
You'll
I
get
can tell
another
you guys-
wave if they somehow fall to Ball State. You will be sent back. I think.
Exactly.
No, I've heard this before. I was home Saturday night for the Kentucky game, so it's not just my European vacation, but it is just not the Vanderbilt game. But it is surreal being in Europe when like the 11 a.m. games kick off at 6 p.m. Like, and you know the Vanderbilt game ended at 2:30 in the morning local time there. So it's next time I'm going to Europe, it's not going to be during the football season. Put it that way.
So Mitch, Alabama, the Vanderbilt defeats Alabama. They follow it up with a win against Kentucky on the road last week. They are on the edge of the top 25. They were the team that received the others receiving votes. That section. They received the most votes of a team that did not make the top 25 this past week. When you look at those two games together, what has most impressed you about Vanderbilt's performance over the past 2 weeks?
A lot. Nothing fluky about either game. Cliche, whatever cliche you want to use, just doing the little things that you need to do to win the games. I mean, they've not had a 3-and-out on offense since the fourth quarter of the Missouri game. They've some stats. They have scored for the season. They've scored 24 times on 24 trips inside the red zone. And the real key there is touchdowns. 19 touchdowns on 25 trips inside the red zone. That's 76%. They've only turned the ball over twice. So they've, Clark Lee talks about it. They're playing the way they think they need to play to win the game. It's controlling the ball, limiting possessions, and not turning it over, not giving the other team big plays, not giving the other team short field. So, you can look at those box scores, and especially the Alabama game. Alabama averaged 8 yards a play, and say, how did Vanderbilt win the game? But when you only have 6 or whatever, Alabama had X amount of possessions, and they didn't have any short fields, that's how Vanderbilt won the game. So I think that's probably the most impressive part, that they're just sticking to their formula, and there's nothing fluky about it. Now, if they played Alabama 10 times in Nashville, would they beat them 5? I don't think so, but I think they might beat them more than once. And, that's probably not something we expected to say.
So imagine for a moment, it's back in the day. You've got a television with rabbit ears, none of this multi-view stuff that I can't handle, where you can watch 4 games at one time. I've never really enjoyed that, but this is not about me. This is about you. My point is that you have the opportunity to watch one game and one game only. Are you watching Alabama and Tennessee or Georgia and Texas this weekend?
Georgia and Texas. I enjoy the history of the Alabama-Tennessee rivalry. I grew up, I still am, but I grew up the son of an Alabama alum. So I grew up in New Jersey as a huge Alabama fan. And
I'm sure there were many of you in New Jersey, a lot of Alabama fans in New Jersey.
There were not many of us. Although I went to an Alabama at Temple game in Philadelphia when I was in high school. And I think 36,000 of the 37,000 fans there were Alabama fans. So I enjoy that rivalry, and I enjoy the intrigue of the game. But I think Georgia, Texas, the fact that you've got the number 1 team in the country and another top 5 team, and what we think could be a preview of the conference championship game, and the fact that it's a new game. I mean, these teams have played in bowl games before, but that's what we would talk about realignment. We might not like realignment and all this stuff, but we enjoy when we get the Ohio State-Oregon game. We enjoy it when we get the Texas-Georgia game. So I'm really looking forward to watching that one.
Talk with Mitch Light of The Athletic, discussing college football, SEC, all over. Mitch, quickly, before I get into the SEC, back into the SEC, the Heisman Trophy race. Obviously, you got a few guys. Hunter's down.
Yeah.
Don't know if he's going to play this game or not. Didn't play last game or played portions of it, so that may hurt his chances at winning a Heisman. Shedeur Sanders, he didn't play a great game. It wasn't a bad game either. So is this a 2-player race between Ashton Jeanty, and Dillon Gabriel?
Too early, I think. In our this Heisman straw poll on the Athletics website, which is run magnificently by Joe Rexrode, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He collects all the data. I make the pretty charts, but he collects the data. So
Joe still doesn't know how to take a screenshot in 2024, let alone do anything with tables and charts and stuff.
Yes, clearly. So I was torn this week because I had Hunter in previous weeks. I went with Jeanty number 1 this week, Hunter number 2, and it looks like he's playing this week. And then I went Cam Ward 3. That was really Gabriel's first big performance of the season. He's been good, hasn't been great, but obviously did it on a big stage. I still think Jalen Milroe will have an opportunity to put up big games there. The thing about Jeanty, he has to keep dominating, which he's doing. But when you play at Boise State or Group of 5 school, you can't afford to have like 13 carries for 42 yards against Utah State or something like that. He needs to keep it up, which I think he will. His numbers are incredible. So it's going to be an interesting race because of the fact that we've got a Group of 5 guy who everyone's rallying around. Usually it takes longer in the season for people to realize and jump on the bandwagon, but I think everyone's on the Ashton Jeanty bandwagon by now.
Yeah, that kid's good, man. And I don't even think he played a full game yet. And he's on pace for well over 2,000 yards this season. Mitch, I asked Willie this question. I asked Willie and Adam this question in regards to the whole realignment and the Pac-12 now being the Pac whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you think in maybe down the line here, some years, some of these teams, and I know why they did the move, because of money. I get it. I understand it. But do you think some of these teams may regret leaving the conferences they're in? Because the way I look at it now is you're just going to beat each other up in whether it be the SEC, the Big Ten, or the ACC, or the Big 12. You're going to beat each other up. And some of these teams that left the Pac-12 thought, okay, we're going to the Big Ten, we're going to the SEC. We should get it. As long as we win, as long as we don't lose no more than a game or two, then we're good. Maybe they should have rethought that, because maybe it would have been easier for them to get into the college football playoffs had they stayed in the Pac-12.
Yeah, one school that comes to mind is UCLA.
Yes.
I mean, they've had their issues in the past few years anyway, and not like they were competing for Pac-12 titles.
And I look at USC as well.
Yeah, but specifically UCLA, I have a hard time seeing UCLA being a college football caliber playoff team in the Big Ten in the next decade. You make a valid point there, Derek, but no school was really acting. They were all acting out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
They all went because they thought they had to. Almost every realignment move we've seen, whether it's Arizona State, those schools wanted to stay in the Pac-12. They all wanted the Pac-12 to exist as it was, but it wasn't. So everyone made their moves because they had to and didn't want to be left behind. There cannot be anyone on the UCLA campus or the USC campus who really thought they'd rather be in the Big Ten than the Pac-12. And you're right. The number, just look at I'm looking at the standings right now, and you got 16 teams in a league. It's a lot harder to finish in the top 2 or 3 of a 16-team league than a 10 or 12-team league. And but that's the world we live in right now. And these schools have kind of made their bed. Now they gotta exist in them.
I do wonder, at like 20 years, will it be different? Will it cycle back at all to regional, geographical stuff like it used to be, or will it stay and get even crazier than it is right now? Well, one thing, Mitch, that does look apparent with the NIL dynamic here, this new world, is that it does seem like it's narrowed the gap between the top teams, the top 5 or 6 that would be in the playoff contention, and then the next 15 to 30, I think you could probably say. Would you agree with that? Like, I didn't think this would be the case. I thought the rich would only get richer and there would be more separation. but I feel like it's moved more towards parity.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I will caution that we're still so early in this cycle or whatever we want to call it, like 1 year, 2 years. I don't know if that's going to be like in 5 years, we need to look, and maybe in the year 2027, there's three dominant teams and there's a huge gap. But to your point, I think everyone kind of agrees, and I've heard a lot of people say it this way: the bad teams are better and the elite teams aren't as good. And there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Kirby Smart complained, because coaches complain about everything, in the offseason, and everyone kind of rolled our eyes at him. He's like, we don't have the depth that we used to have, because kids want to play. So the Georgia 2s are playing at Kentucky now as the 1s and all over. So those teams don't have as much depth. I still think the elite teams have the ability to plug some holes at a left tackle or a linebacker and really make what would have been a weakness into a strength. So I think that's how the elite teams are using the portal in cases. But I think overall, these top teams don't have the depth. And when you get into this point of the season, you have injuries and stuff. We're seeing that play come to fruition. But I totally agree. We're just not. It just doesn't seem like we have those elite teams that we did several years ago.
All right, so let's look at the two huge SEC games here. First, I've watched the last 3 Alabama games because everybody watched Georgia, Alabama.
Yeah.
I obviously watched Alabama play Vanderbilt, and then I happened to I was just in Detroit.
Who won that game? I was out of the country.
The Commodores.
Okay, thanks for
They
that.
were able to beat Alabama. Isn't that interesting? Like the
Okay.
person that goes away from like, wait a minute, what? I came back to Vanderbilt to beat Alabama. What?
Yeah.
But and then I watched a lot of their game because it was an early game. I was in Detroit getting ready for the Preds game. That was the game that was on, and Alabama was very fortunate to win. They were fighting uphill from the start, even though they were in the lead. It never felt good, and they had that very uneasy feeling in the crowd. Are you surprised they're favored at Tennessee by 3 right now?
A little bit. I would have said pick 'em. I mean, a lot of the betting is the lines are bet to, equal money on both sides. So there's still that Alabama, like in the NFL, the Cowboys are probably favored more often than they should be because they're the Cowboys. Alabama still has that national brand, but Tennessee's got its issues, obviously, which we can get to. They're struggling. But totally with you. The Alabama game was an entertaining game the other day. And they're up 14-0 first half, and they look like they're going to put them away. And then they have the turnover, and then the busted coverage, and then game on. And it was kind of a strange game. There's just a lot of things that don't appear to be going well with this Alabama team since that first half of that Georgia game. So to answer your question specifically, I probably would have thought this would be more of a pick-em.
So what's the key matchup in your mind? Because Alabama's defense specifically, to me, looks like they really struggle in the areas where they're usually so strong. They just that physicality, that domination. They just don't seem to be showing that at all.
Yeah, they're not getting off the field very well. Obviously, the third down, what was it, 13 of 18 or whatever Vanderbilt did. They are. I just was looking at some stats earlier. They've been on the field for an average of 74 plays per game in the SEC. That's the most. Now, I don't know how much that matters. It matters to a degree, but they're just allowing too many third down conversions. In SEC games, it's 47% third down. You'd never see that in the Nick Saban era or in previous 10, 15 years with Alabama. But then you look at a Tennessee team that has had trouble sustaining drives. I mean, they've been going 3 and out far too often. They're not getting the big strike. Just think 2 years ago, how often, you'd be watching a game and Tennessee average scoring drive, 47 seconds. They're not getting those big plays. And when you're not getting those big plays, that means you got to march the ball down the field, and they're not doing that. They have had far too many 3 and out. So it's sort of like you got an offense that's struggling to sustain drives against a team that is struggling to get the other team off the field. So I'm just fascinated what happens with this game. I mean, Milroe, I don't think Alabama lost to Vanderbilt because of Jalen Milroe. I think he's been playing fine. He wasn't great against South Carolina, and now there's a lot of eyes on Nico. He's clearly not playing very well. So this is a game where 3 weeks ago we were like, wow, this is going to be one of the games of the year. We were saying it's going to be a top 5 matchup, and the winner, the loser is fine for the playoff, all that. It's sort of an elimination game now. So there's just a ton of intrigue in Knoxville with this one.
So what about Georgia? Is this an elimination game for Georgia at Texas with them already having a loss?
I don't think so. I mean, I think I'm looking at the schedule right now, but one thing that's is going to hurt Georgia. I think if they lose this game, is the fact that I thought Georgia played at Ole Miss this year. Yeah, they do. Okay, this is the fact that Ole Miss has lost a couple games because before we were looking at schedules before the year, and you're like, they play at Alabama, they play at Texas, and at Ole Miss. So this is a team that can afford some losses with that brutal schedule. But if you lose at Alabama and you lose to Texas, where are your quality wins coming from? That Clemson game is going to have a better shelf life than we thought. And they still play Tennessee at home, but I think they can lose this game and still make the college football playoff with 2 losses. But they've got to play better. Basically, look at their resume. Since the first half of the Clemson game, they didn't play great against Kentucky. They had an awful first half against Alabama. Auburn game was fine, but they let Mississippi State hang around. They gave up 31 points in that game. So there's a lot of questions about this team too.
Mitch Light from The Athletic. Mitch, I'm glad that despite that you're very cultured because of your wonderful vacation, you're not too cultured to still talk to us every week, and we appreciate that.
Never. I always enjoy it, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Mitch. We're not too lowbrow for Mitch Light.
He probably wasn't thinking about us very much while he was in Florence, though.
Don't sell
He
yourself.
shouldn't have been.
Don't sell yourself short. You don't think that when he found out that Vanderbilt won, he was like, I wonder what Willie would say right now.
I can't wait to talk to Adam Willie. Like, he was probably thinking, I should call them from Florence and just do the show.
That's what FaceTime audio is for.
Yes.
I've made the mistake of making calls from out of the country. My phone bill did not appreciate it. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, we've talked a lot about the Titans defense this season, how it grades. A lot of this is where the numbers and the eye test tell some different stories. And the defense is going to get, in my opinion, its first real test of the season this weekend. We'll break that down next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vinkin, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Derek Mason here. November 9th, mark your calendars and get ready to feel the thrill at the Iron Goddess Motorcycle Show, which is sponsored by Law Tigers. Whether you're a seasoned rider or just love the adrenaline, we've got it all. Vintage beauties, latest models, and heart racing performance await you. Join us for a day filled with action, power-packed showcases, and the spirit of adventure. Don't miss out. Fuel your passion and meet fellow enthusiasts. Ride on over. The open road is calling. It's the Iron Goddess all-female show, which is, like I said, it's coming to Nashville. So go to the website to get your tickets. It's IronGoddessMotorcycleShow.com. That's IronGoddessMotorcycleShow.com, which is sponsored by Law Tigers. See you there.
D. Mays, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, and Willie Donick doing some custodial work around the studio.
Because of one, we're going to blame this on who? Joe Rexroad once again.
Apparently, Joe
Golly,
Rexroad
Joe.
keeps the studio a pig.
Joe, you're a pig. I just want to say that. Joe, not Big Joe, but Joe Rexroad, you're a pig, man. You're
It
a
makes
pig.
Michigan State look bad.
Yeah, you're making us look bad, man. You're just messy. You're messy, Joe. Everybody's pointing at you, Rex. So it's not just me. Everybody's pointing at you. You're messy, Rex.
How many Splenda packets did you just pick up off the floor, Willie?
Messy Joe, man. Messy Joe.
There was 4, and there was the remnants of like a paper towel that had been soiled with coffee or
yeah.
something.
Robbie, come
Something
get you.
brown.
Robbie, come get your man.
Yeah.
He's making a mess of the studio.
But it wasn't
Get your
that.
co-host.
It was just scattered on the floor.
Yeah, it was just on the floor. Rex, you're messy, man. You're a pig.
The funny thing is, if it wasn't Joe, like
Yeah, we're going to put it on Joe.
it's one of those things where he's got the reputation, so everybody's just going to assume it's him, even though we weren't here when it happened.
He probably wasn't even in the
Yeah.
studio, but we still blaming it on him. I don't care.
in
Just
this
like it had to
studio,
be him.
in this studio, you're guilty until proven innocent.
Exactly.
So, Joe Rexroad, clean up after yourself,
Yeah.
please. We all have to work here. But speaking of work, the Tennessee Titans get back to work on Sunday against the Buffalo Bills. And based on yards allowed per game, the Titans are still the number 1 defense in the NFL at 248.8 yards per game. And this is where the eye test and the numbers, we talk about how they have to sort of marry each other. You can't rely on one heavily versus the other. You have to find a way to blend them. And Jared made this point yesterday in discussing the Titans defense. Yes, they've allowed the fewest yards per game in the NFL. Think about their opponents so far. Think about the quarterbacks they've faced. Caleb Williams in his first career NFL start. Aaron Rodgers on a Jets team that just fired its head coach and demoted its play caller, who was calling plays in that game that the Jets won. You know, you had Malik Willis, you had Joe Flacco, you beat Tyler Huntley. This is, in my opinion, coming up the first real test for this Titans defense. I was amazed to learn that Josh Allen has not thrown an interception this season. He has 10 passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions. This is the first time in his NFL career he has gone 6 consecutive games without throwing an interception. One thing we talk a lot about with Josh Allen is his propensity for turnovers, but he hasn't thrown an interception at all this season. There's the addition of Amari Cooper, who we expect to make his Bills debut on Sunday against the Titans. I feel like if this defense wants to call itself a good defense, this is the test.
I think the number one thing I would say to this discussion is, and I have said this for a long time, and Jim Schwartz was the guy that really clued me in on this way back in the day, right when analytics was just starting. I think baseball and Moneyball had come out, but it had not filtered into other sports as much. Jim Schwartz was the one that told me, he said, yards are way overrated and should not be the marker for who has the best defense. Fewest yards does not mean you have the best defense. There's the context of how the game flows. How do you do in the red zone? When do you give up the yards? All of these things. So I always have my trusty rusty site that I've always looked at. And there's since then, since Jim Schwartz was a young defensive coordinator, this was like 2007, 2008, and he's still in the league. There's a lot of other websites now that have their own methods of trying to figure out how do you really rate a defense and not just who's given up the fewest yards. So that is an archaic stat. So there is no way that the Titans are the number 1 defense just because they've given up the fewest yards. That being said, the one that I like to look at, that I understand the language because I've watched it for so long, in FTN Fantasy, which for a long time was called Football Outsiders, they're number 9, which is still a very good number.
Yeah.
They've done very well, but it's not number 1. You know who's the number 1 defense in their metrics, and it's not even close? Minnesota. And did I see that coming before the season started? Wow, no. I would not have thought they were going into the year going to be the number 1 defense. But
I see Jared's point. These numbers do factor in the things that Jared is mentioning there, that they do measure in level of competition and some of the other nuanced things that go beyond the yards. For example, in the Jets game that was very winnable, it wasn't their best performance in the red zone. They didn't give up very many yards, but key plays at key times, the Jets cashed in and got touchdowns and not field goals. That's a huge part of the equation when you're evaluating the defense. So all of this to say, I think they're doing a very nice job on defense. Very good job. But, okay, here's another one. Last week against the Colts got the biggest play of the game, arguably, was the long pass where Snead gets whistled for interference. That doesn't go on the defense's yards, right? That is penalty yards.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's factored in yards.
I don't believe it is.
I think you can't do it.
It's only passing yards and receiving yards, or passing yards, rushing yards that add up to the yards on a defense.
But that
right?
was I believe it was the longest play of the game for either team.
Yeah.
So that's an example of what we're talking about, where you have to look past the yards.
Yeah, you can't just look at, yardage and say, well, hey, listen, they're not giving up many yards throwing. They're not giving up many yards rushing. Yeah, they're the number one team. Well, how does their third down look? How does their red zone look? Are they getting takeaways? Stuff like that. Those are all those things factor in. And then what you said, level of competition. For years, like even last year before that, Buffalo was the number one ranked team in regards to their defense in the NFL. And I would always say, that's not right. Because what I'm watching and what the numbers say are two different things. I'm not watching a defense that is a shutdown defense, is a defense that puts fear in you. That's not what I'm watching. I'm watching a defense that you're moving the ball on and everything else. And I think what I was missing was the turnovers and the red zone. Those are things that really count. Turnovers, red zone, and third down.
And how many turnovers does the Titans defense have? Two.
So to me, and then if you just look, because watching the game last week, I think Archuleta and someone else was calling the game last
Spiro
week.
Ditas.
Yes. And they showed the pass going down the field. And Archuleta made the comment of, he didn't even have to grab him. He had to grab him. That dude was 2 steps in front of him. Had he not grabbed him, that would have been a touchdown. Archuleta, well, he was going to fall. No, he fell because Snead grabbed him and pulled his arm. That would have been a clear walk-in touchdown. The only thing that would have stopped that was Pierce dropping the football. You look at the Miami game, 2 balls that should have been clear touchdowns. I know they don't count to almost, but I'm just looking. I'm using that for context. He's been beat several times. It's just they didn't complete the pass. If Tua's there, that's a different ball game. If he doesn't grab Pierce, that's a different ball game. I don't know what's going on with Snead. Maybe he's still dealing with some injuries or not, but he hasn't played his best football. And for Denard Wilson to say he's the best corner in the league, he's not the best. His play hasn't shown that. I'm not saying that, over the last couple of years, he hadn't been the best, because if you total up the last 3 years, even this season, yeah, he's been, if he hasn't been the best, he's been a top 3 corner.
He did not allow a touchdown in coverage as the nearest defender in the regular season last year.
Exactly. So if we're basing it on that, then yes. But I am basing it on what I'm seeing. Maybe he's hurt. Maybe he doesn't know the defense as well as he should. But what I'm seeing is a guy that has gotten beaten several times.
I don't think he's been bad, but
he hasn't been. I'm not saying he's been bad,
yeah, but I don't know if he's dominating.
Exactly.
Like another one to go with your stat about the yards. If you watch that game on Sunday, where it was both teams trying to run it, not take too many chances, just keep it close and let's see if we can win at the end. The Colts successfully did that. They didn't get a lot of yards.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the stats, they didn't get a lot of yards. But did they make the key plays at the key times? Yes. And on a lot of those plays, Flacco made a play. And the other thing that
was evident to me. I didn't see the defense for the Titans step up with a big pass rush or, at key times. They didn't have a relentless pass rush where like the Colts are saying, I don't know what we can call here. We don't have much of it. I think they were like, okay, we're all right. Key play, boom. We make the play. They weren't afraid. Like they're not striking fear into they're a solid defense. They're doing a good job. Don't get me wrong. They're taking the run away, which is probably the best thing they do. That's the space eaters in the middle absolutely are good. Fast linebackers that are running sideline to sideline, they're tough to run on. But I still think there's another level before you can say they're one of the top defenses in the league.
Ernest Jones said after the Packers game, we're not playing good football in the spots we need to be. We're playing good football in the spots that we don't. And I believe he reiterated that after the Colts game. And I think that's to Willie's point. When the Titans defense needs a key stop, it feels like they're not making it.
They needed a key stop on that last touchdown that Indianapolis scored.
From Michael Pittman on the jump ball.
But here, this is why you need a smart quarterback. This is why you need a quarterback that if he's not the greatest from a physical standpoint, but he knows the game. You know what made that play work?
The Pittman touchdown?
Yeah, you know what made that play work?
What's that?
Joe Flacco. You see, watch what Joe Flacco did the minute that ball was hiked to him. He retreated. Because he knew like they're coming on an all-out blitz.
The blitz
and I'm
was
just
coming
going,
free.
I know who I'm throwing it to, and I'm going to throw it to a spot, but I got to give myself enough time. So I am retreating. The minute he got the ball, he took steps back. He was going, and he threw it to a spot, and Pittman went and got it. That's why you need a smart quarterback. But it goes along to what Willie was saying about the defense. In order for Snead, I think, for us to really see the Snead that we saw in Kansas City, they need a better pass rush. He benefited from having Jones and Jones being in everybody's face just about every other play. Defensive backs benefit from that. I'm not saying that it's all Jones and the defensive line, but show me a shutdown corner without a good defensive line. Show me that. You talk about Revis. They had a hell of a defensive line with Rex as head coach / defensive coordinator. You look at the Baltimore teams, they had a hell of a defensive line. You look at our Titans team, had a hell of a defensive line. And I'm not taking anything away from our secondary guys. But if you want them to be the best players that they can be, then it's a work in tandem. The defensive line need to do their part and the secondary do their part. You can't ask them to cover 4 or 5 seconds because you're not getting the rush. There's no DB out there in the world that can cover 3, 4, 5 seconds if you're not getting rushed on a quarterback. So I think in order for us to see the true Snead, they need to start getting more pressure on the quarterback.
So L'Jarius Snead as the nearest defender this season, he's allowed 10 receptions on 23 targets for 124 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, again, that does not include in terms of the receptions, like the plays against the Dolphins that you mentioned, because those would probably have been receptions had someone else other than Tyler Huntley been throwing the ball.
I think he's been fortunate on a
Yeah.
few.
Yes.
That could have been big, could have skewed, it could have changed those numbers a lot.
The passer rating when he is the nearest defender is 75.3. It was 55.5 last season.
At 73.3 is good. But he also, the other thing that I don't think goes into that grade is he does commit a lot of penalties. He's aggressive, and he says it. He goes, I'm going to be aggressive. I'm going to get a couple penalties. So one of the biggest plays in the game, as we mentioned, was that pass interference on Pierce where he was beat and did have to commit the penalty. And then he was the guy, it was a great play by Flacco.
Mm-hmm.
Tall guy, well-designed, threw it up where he needed to go. I think that's probably tough for any defensive back.
Yeah.
But it was against Snead.
But if you're not getting to the quarterback, he's allowed to make those plays because if we're going to, if in my mind as a defensive back, if I hear the call and it's a all-out blitz, I'm thinking he only got a second or two to throw this football. So I don't really have to, if I just know what I'm doing, I know I don't have to be in this for no more than 2 seconds.
Well, who was rushing the passer for the Chiefs when L'Jarius Snead was in the backfield?
Jones.
Chris Jones.
And Chris Jones is the best defensive lineman in the National Football League.
Correct. So, I mean, if Chase from White Bluff on our text line mentions Marshawn Lattimore of the Saints. The Saints once had a good D line at a point
Exactly.
in time, not recently, and his performance has suffered as a result. I can speak to that from personal experience.
Well, that's because it all works in tandem. There hasn't been many defensive backs, even a great Deion Sanders, who I think was the greatest defensive back to play. He had the benefit of some really good defensive fronts, not to say that Prime couldn't have went out there and did what he did regardless, but even the greatest of them all, Deion Sanders, needs to have a good defensive front in front of him.
615-737-1025. We'll wrap up the show next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mays, Vingan, and Donick, 1025-1063, The Game. We'll regulate you here for the final segment. I'm hip. I'm cool.
Regulators, mount.
You'll never let me forget that I said treach.
Exactly. You will never forget
I
that.
will never. I will never hear the
You got
end
a
of
long
that.
way to go to come out of that hole.
Exactly.
You're deep, deep, deep underground. Just like Eddie Murphy or Axel Foley was like deep, deep, deep undercover.
Anyway, yesterday we received a call from our friend Mark in Nashville, one that made Willie break out in hives in live time.
Oh man,
when Mark guaranteed a Subway Series, World
Oh,
Series
man.
between the Mets and the Yankees. The Yankees are halfway there. They're up 2-0 in the ALDS. The Mets host the Dodgers tonight at Citi Field. The NLCS is tied at 1 game apiece. I have to imagine the purple carpet is being rolled out for Grimace in Queens. Certainly not for the Hawktua girl. I don't know what she's up to these days. I hear she has a podcast now. They'll just give a podcast to anybody. But Willie, we haven't gotten the vibe check from you with your New York Mets recently. How are you feeling as you head into game 3 tonight against the Dodgers?
They did what they needed to do in Los Angeles. They took advantage of the weakness of the Dodgers.
Mhm.
The Dodgers, think about, here are the guys that are not pitching for the Dodgers, that play for the Dodgers. Dustin May, he looks like Carrot Top out there, but he keeps getting, they thought they might have him for the second half of the season. He keeps tearing up his elbow. Tony Gonsolin, who, when they won it, had an unbelievable year in 2020. Good pitcher. Never heard of that. Clayton Kershaw, you've heard of him, not pitching. Tyler Glasnow. So there's a list of like 6 or 7 pitchers that you could make that are really talented guys that they just don't have.
A lot of money on ice, basically.
Yeah, but they're still good enough to overcome it because they have Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, and Mookie Betts. Freddie Freeman is playing on one leg. He's got a bad ankle injury. He can't run. He can still hit. He can make his way to first base just well enough. So that's what the Mets have to take advantage of. But the Dodgers, because of all these pitching things, they had to do what's called a bullpen game. Just hodgepodge of relievers trying to get through. And the Mets they absolutely had to win game 2 with their hottest pitcher, Sean Manaea, against the bullpen. They needed to win that game, and they did. It got a little hairy. They jumped ahead, and I was on pins and needles for the last 9 or 10 outs, but they did get it done. So now they go back home. The Mets they don't have a great ace pitcher, but they have depth. There's not tons of difference between the guys that are running out there, and they've been steady. The Dodgers now, for example, they've got Walker Buehler, former Commodore, national championship winner. When he's been on, he's been a dominant playoff pitcher for the Dodgers. But he's had 2 Tommy John surgeries. And if you watched him pitch against the Padres, he's not quite at the stuff level that he has when he is at full strength. 98, 99, wicked movement. He's trying to battle his way through it. All that to say, I think the Mets, they have a chance because I think they have more pitching depth, and they have played really, really well at home. So they got the split on the road, and now they come back, and it's going to be a great atmosphere at Citi Field.
Answer this question for me, Willie and Adam. Is there truly, and this is a serious question, is there truly a home field advantage in baseball?
That's a better question for Willie.
Is there truly? Like I don't know, because
I'd like
other
to think
sports,
in the postseason that there is. And the other thing in baseball that's different in other sports is you can tailor your team to the ballpark.
Okay.
And the ballparks are different,
the
right?
dimensions.
The dimensions
Yes.
of the fences, how the ball plays. Like if you have a big open field with, you can put speedsters in the outfield to cover that ground. So I do think there is such a thing as home field advantage. I don't think people get intimidated too much. Although let's say this, if you watch the Guardians game against the Yankees, in game 1, Cleveland put a pitcher in there to try to get a big out, and he just unraveled in New York. He threw 4 wild pitches, and it was right out of the movie Major League. In fact, the meme was going when Rick Vaughn, what's Bob Uecker's name? Harry Doyle. He set a record, the Wild Thing, Rick Vaughn, with 4 wild pitches in 1 inning.
Well, the guy for Cleveland actually did throw 4 wild pitches in the same inning. So it was like a real life major league. And he buckled under the pressure. I do think that there is pressure that a crowd can create in a postseason baseball game. Maybe not as much in the regular season, but definitely in the postseason.
I got to ask you about this hat that I shared with the two of you yesterday. So Eric Adams, who is the embattled mayor of New York,
That's being kind.
So,
that he's
yeah,
being
exactly.
under federal indictment.
Yeah.
It's more complicated than we can explain here. He was photographed wearing a hat recently that had both the Mets and Yankees logo on it.
I need to take him down for
The
that.
biggest fashion faux pas. He should be federally indicted for wearing that hat. But I found a quote from a spokesperson for Mayor Eric Adams explaining the hat. I want to read this to you. He says, quote, Mayor Adams is a long-suffering Mets fan and has been clear he's cheering them on to win it all. But as the mayor of the greatest city in the world, he's also rooting for a Subway Series that will make millions of New York sports fans happy while bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars of economic impact for our city. To which many New Yorkers said, no, you got to pick a side, man. In no world can you wear a hat with the Yankees and Mets logo on it. It's absurd.
Especially if you're a Mets fan.
Especially if you're a Mets
Well,
fan.
if he's admitting he's actually a Mets fan, that's not going to fly very well. He just lost a lot of the Mets people, and the Yankee fans are gonna be like, we don't want you.
Exactly.
If you're a Mets fan,
So
we
he's
don't- why
left
you-
out
Get
with
that
no
Yankey
team.
logo
I
on.
mean, his
Yeah, we don't want
approval
you.
rating was already in the toilet
Yeah.
for more important things than baseball. But if you're trying to appease everybody, but look, I can root for both teams. It's not going to work.
That's like growing up in Alabama. You either an Alabama fan or you're an Auburn fan. It's one or the other. You
Yes,
can't be
you're not wearing a
both
hat
of them.
with
Yeah,
both on
both
there.
of them. You can't do that.
I feel like in the Subway Series of 2000, I think Giuliani was the mayor, and he stayed true to, he was all Yankees. Like he was Yankees through and through, and was not playing that card down the middle at all. I'm sure he was happy that it was a Subway Series and all that, but he was true Yankees throughout. So I don't know in the history of New York mayors if the mayor just always goes with whoever he grew up rooting for, he or she, whatever. I don't think they've ever had a female mayor in New York City, but I don't remember there being somebody trying to pull the stunt of wearing a Yankee and Met hat.
What would a young Willie say if he saw his mayor with a Mets and a Yankee hat on? What would the young Willie would have said?
I think just the people around me would have said, no, this is not how we roll. This is not how we roll in the Big Apple.
No,
You just don't pull that.
He's got plenty of issues, Eric Adams, more pressing issues
More
than
pressing
this.
He put some gasoline on the fire there.
Absolutely. That'll do it for us today. We'll be live at Bridgestone Arena tomorrow, where the Predators will host the Edmonton Oilers in a big matchup. Always like seeing those two teams face each other. Stillman and Company coming up next, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Be love, love on your people. Have a wonderful and safe Wednesday. Peace.